I'll tell it when I'm live.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome, welcome, welcome back. It's your boy Blue and the homie XP.72. Say hello.
What is going on, man? It's Thursday, guys. It's Thursday already. Wow, this week has been running like so quick, man. But guess what? We're happy to be on a Thursday with you guys with the Blu-XPerience and our special guest today. But Blue, go ahead, man. You have the
Our
honors, man.
our special guest, I think XP might know him longer, but I've been very honored to meet this guy in person and in both of our live streams and many different streamers live streams. The homie Captain CHEMTRAILS, and he has earned the identity of Captain. He is a 757 pilot, 767 pilot, 737 pilot, 737 MAX pilot, A320 pilot, and the list goes on. I believe he's also a instructor and many other things. He loves airplanes. He's an aviation geek, lover, nerd. He loves fast cars and loud motorcycles as well. So if you relate to that, you are on the right stream today. Say hello to the people, Captain CHEMTRAILS.
Hey everybody. Everything was all correct except for the max part. I don't fly the max, but yeah,
Not
everything
yet.
else, all of the above.
Not yet. If you
But
can
thanks,
fly the
like-
37, you can fly the
Not
max,
yet,
right?
Not yet. What's that?
I said if you can fly the 737, you can fly the max, right?
I mean, I don't know. I don't want to answer that until we get some at my airline, but I
right.
maybe.
Right. I forgot.
But
you guys.
like legally speaking, yeah, all the NGs, the 700s, 800s, 900s, the 757, 200, and the 300, and then the 76, 300 ERs. And then also I did the CRJs, the 200s, the 700s, and the 900s. Yep.
Okay. Two things.
Wow.
Two things. You just struck
Impressive.
a nerve. Two things. First of all, even though your airline does not particularly fly the max, but you just said that if you can fly the NG, then technically you're rated if the airline had it, right? You could fly the max. Is that correct?
I think you still have to do a differences course if that's how I recall. Like, if we do get them. I mean, I know we're getting the Neos for the 320 series, and I don't think you're just gonna like one day show up and there's a Neo at the gate and just go fly it. I think there's gonna be a little bit of, reading that you're gonna have to do, at least some sort of presentation on differences, and it may not evolve into like a simulator check, but at least some sort of systems knowledge. So I would assume the same thing with the with the Max, and because the engines are a little different and they're a little bit more uh, tighter spec. So
Gotcha.
I know they were having a lot of problems with oil tolerances and being exceeded because warm up times are being not adhered to or whatever. So yeah, I could see that happening. But I mean, if we get Maxes, I'm not opposed to flying it. It's a good.
Of course
I mean,
not. Wow.
it's
Nice.
One other thing.
but
One
not
other
yet. Not
one other thing the second thing of the two things I was talking about was we have been looking for a CRJ pilot since the first
What
Blue
I
Experience
volunteered.
episode.
Okay. Yeah. No.
CRJ Pilot Lives Matter was a thing that got started back then. And I don't know. So can I guess to kick it off, I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, what's it like being a CRJ pilot compared to now flying so many other different types of planes?
I mean, so it was my first jet. So
Oh,
when I first got hired by the airline, it was a regional airline that's no longer around anymore. But I mean, I went from basically flying Cessnas and Pipers, and I think the biggest plane I flew was a Cessna 310, which is a multi-engine airplane and decently fast. But to straight flying a jet
Hmm.
was a big leap, and it doesn't quite put it to perspective. You do the simulation training, and then you get your first day on IOE, and you show up, and there's a real jet, and you're gonna fly it. And I was under the assumption that the line check airman's gonna be like, "Hey, I got the first leg," and then, but no, he's like, "You're flying it," and I'm like, "Where? I don't even."
wow.
So day one at the airlines, you just get thrown in the fire, and it was some like special airport. It was Charleston, West Virginia.
Hmm.
And if you've ever been there, the approach in there is it's in mountainous terrain. The airport's kind of up on top of a hill, and there's all these like kind of optical illusions with the way the hills and coming into the runway and stuff. And it's a fairly short runway. And I was looking at all that, like going there, like reading up all the stuff, and I was going, "Can I fly this?"
Wow.
Do you
But
have
we
a
don't know. It worked out. It worked out. We did it. And I mean, it was in the CRJ 200. And there's a big difference between the CRJ 200 and the sevens and nines, I will say.
really?
Is that
Yeah, oh
power
yeah,
wise or what?
everything. I mean, the 200 I think it was just kind of like a exploitation of the Challenger, right? So it was a business jet first, and they said, oh, if we stretch this out, we can put seats in it, make it a passenger jet. But that just didn't work out. I mean, it was very underpowered for a jet. It was still a jet, so like below 20,000 feet, it's still pretty fast machine. But once you get up to high altitude where you need excess thrust and stuff, it just kind of dies on you.
Hmm.
And it just from a passenger comfort, I mean, if anybody's ever been in a CRJ 200, I think everybody is waiting for that day that they no longer have to get on one again.
Yeah.
Not a
Wow.
fan. Not a fan.
Yeah. Well, okay, here's a case in point. So the floor level, like, so when it was designed for a business jet, it had a bigger cabin, and they didn't worry about baggage space and stuff. When they made it an airliner, they had to raise the floor up.
Hmm.
Well, one of the problems with that is the windows, they can't change it because that's part of the design of the airplane, right? So if you ever fly in a CRJ 200, you'll notice that the windows are way low. Like they're made for like little kids, but it's because the
Oh,
floor
wow.
is raised. So stuff like that, I'm just like, it's an odd little machine. But it had trailing link gear, but it had no leading edge devices. It kind of came down really nose low.
Hmm.
Um, it scared jump seaters a lot of times because they'd be like, "You gonna flare yet?" Like,
You're gonna flare.
you got to give them a brief. You got to be like, "Hey, look, when we're coming in that last 50 feet, it's gonna be looking like we're just nosing into the runway. But trust me, we're gonna flare out." So it's totally normal. Because or else if you had guys that never been in the jump seat and riding it, you'll and you can see that when you watch videos of them coming in. They come in really nose low because they don't have any leading edge devices. So, but yeah, there's just a lot of things. The bleed system on that thing, there was a certain way you had to open the valves and swap the bleeds from the APU to the engines. And if you didn't do it right, you could mess something up. And then all that got fixed on the 7 and 9. I mean, it was like automatic.
Wow.
Nice.
You swapped it out, and then there was clip. It didn't have auto throttles, but it had like these detents, kind of like an Airbus in a way. But at least I don't know, it was a much better design and more powerful, more capable. I enjoyed flying the 700, probably the most. It just had the most excess power. The 900 was pretty good, but you could just tell they're like, oh, we got all this extra performance, let's just make it longer, and so.
Wow. Let me step back for a second here. So you said
Sure.
that was the very first jet you ever flown in real life, correct? All right.
Correct. Well,
All right.
I take that back. There was a Citation that I flew, but
Ah,
it was literally a guy that he had a lot of toys at the hangar next door to where I was instructing at the time in Texas. And I just like peeked around the corner and he's like, "Hey man, come in. Come check it out." I said, "Oh, okay." And then he cooked up the GPU and he fired it up and then he goes, "Hey, do you want to go for a flight sometime?" And I was just like, "Sure." And like literally he's like, "I gotta take this thing." He was telling me to go with him to like Alaska and then like airline back, but I don't think he failed to realize I was a lowly flight instructor
oh
and
my
I couldn't
God.
even afford the plane ticket to come back.
Oh my god.
So I had to pass on stuff like that because he would take this thing like he'd fly it from Texas up to like Alaska on like fishing trips and then like stay there for like 2 weeks. So
Man.
he was like totally inviting me to come right seat, but I just couldn't even do that. So, but he did have me one day where he's like, "Hey, do you think I got to take this airplane to the Cessna Citation Service Center? It's kind of it's just a place that they do maintenance for the thing. Um, do you want to ride?" And I said, "Sure, where's it at?" Like San Antonio. And I was like, "Oh, that's not that far. I mean, not far in a jet, but it's kind of like a 4-hour drive." And
Right. Worst case, I could drive back.
oh, well, I didn't have a car back, so it's funny because my wife actually like, and that's how dedicated she was. I told her I was like, "Hey, I get to fly a jet." Only one catch. You kind of got to pick me up. So
Oh
she
man.
So she left, like, cause I told her, like, this is around 3 o'clock, so she got off of work, and she just took off driving, and then we left at, like, 5:30 in the evening, got up, and so he let me do the takeoff, we took off, and then we went down to San Antonio. It was, like, a 30-minute flight, so I don't count that as, like, I mean, it was cool, it was to get a little taste of what a jet felt like, but it was a Citation Mustang, so kinda not on the fast side of things, and I didn't have a type rating or anything, so I didn't know anything else other than just taking off and kinda turning on the automation and getting up to cruise, and then he landed it, and then my wife picked me up, and then I had to drive back.
Of course you did.
She drove
Took you
drove back.
30 minutes, took you 4 hours to get back. Oh my God. See, that's my question, right? We sit at a computer, we fly computer planes, and then I had my one little stint in a Cessna. How is it going from like a Cessna to a jet on the first takeoff roll? Like, how quick does it come at you? I know you probably lost some perspective
Well,
now.
so it was Atlanta, right? It was
Mhm.
Atlanta to Charleston for that first flight, and I had never flown out of Atlanta, number 1. I didn't know the procedures, I didn't know, like, how hectic it was, and I was just, like, ready to give my pilot certificate to the check airman. 'Cause I would be missing radio calls. I was like, "Oh my god." Like, they would call us because I was busy doing there's all these checklists you gotta do, flows, and you're trying to remember to do everything, like swapping the bleeds and all that stuff, and then they would call us in the meantime, and it would just totally go right over my head.
Wow.
And so I was just like, "Oh my god, I'm so far behind." And then as soon as we take off, it's a short flight. And so it's like as soon as we take off, we we leave that busy airspace. It's already time to brief the approach, get it, and getting used to doing things so far out. Whereas like when you're in a Cessna, like you got tons of time. Like you can wait till you see the airport to really. But in a jet, I mean, you're doing things so far out, and so just adjusting my brain to that to calibrate it to that speed was quite an adjustment. Um, but it's still flying an airplane. I mean, it still flies. I mean, there are some aerodynamic principles with swept wing jets that kind of come into play, but ailerons, and elevators and rudders, they all kind of function the same way. But yeah, no, the CRJ was a fun plane. I flew a bulk of my time in the 200. Just like as far as like when I first got started, and then had the opportunity to go to the 7 and 9, so I wanted to try that, and I flew that very briefly for, like, the last couple months. I was at the regionals before getting hired at my current place, and so
Wow.
then straight to the 7.3, which was that
Jeez.
was kind of a blessing too.
How
It
much
was
of an upgrade was that from coming from a CRJ 200, 900, and then moving up to
well,
the
so I was a flight simmer, like, from way, way back, like, 1995, probably, yeah, and so, like, I grew up around the PMDG 7.3, so I was
hmm,
kind of familiar with some stuff, and it was kinda like, yes, like, I get to like, every simmer's dream, right? Like, you
yeah.
get to now fly this thing that you've, like, spent time on a computer, like, you know, oogling over, and then here it is in real life, and like you're gonna go to training for it. You're gonna go through the sim type rating. You're gonna and then that, yeah, the first time I flew it, I was like, it was out of New York, JFK.
Wow.
Um,
Wow. Jeez.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Your first flights was something else, man. They just throw you in
Oh
the
yeah,
fire.
no, yeah, no, JFK. Well, yeah, JFK. I never flown in JFK at that point either. Even when I was flying the regionals, I was based in Atlanta and DFW, so we kind of primarily stayed in the southeast. And so, yeah, like I never did much Northeast flying, which is kind of odd. Like a lot of regional guys are based in the Northeast, so they're very familiar. I was kind of like the opposite, but just trial through fire, just hop in and start doing it.
Jeez, man. Wow.
Yeah. No, it was good though. So I do remember that flight, because I was like all nervous about flying it, and he kind of was giving me a big rundown with the landing and stuff, and I actually greased it. I was like, what? Like
Wow.
it was quite surprising, because
So,
even the flight attendants, I think they know. They go, he's a new guy,
oh my God.
bra- brace for that hard
I
landing.
can't
But it was actually
imagine.
really good, and yeah, no, I think it was JFK to Fort Lauderdale, I think. Yeah, yeah, and then
Wow.
yeah.
Here's a mini controversial question. Do you think that guys like you who had to come up through smaller regional jet before you get to bigger airplanes and so forth, do you think you're a better flyer than guys who just go straight to a 737 or an Airbus out of training, aka European style? What do you think?
Um, that's a good question. I think from as far as like the hand flying aspect, I think it is a better way to do it that way, because when you get into a bigger jet, it is actually not as hard to fly. There's just all these automation at your fingertips, and you really hone those hand flying skills flying the smaller planes. Like I still get a lot of enjoyment flying like especially light twins, like flying a twin Cessna again. There's just a lot of work you got to do to get that thing to fly right. And in the jets, you have all VNAV, LNAV, and autopilot and auto land, and you just have all these things at your fingertip. And if you never actually like hand fly too much, it's like that's a degrading skill. So I try to always try to hand fly as much as possible. Obviously, if the situation dictates where ATCs, there's a lot going on, obviously keep the automation just kind of as a tool. But I try not to let it be a crutch. And I don't know if that happens in the European airlines. Like, I always think, like, even if everything were to turn off, like automation, everything goes out, like, I can still hand fly this thing around. Like, it's not going to be a big problem, you know? Like, it's not gonna catch me off guard, and
So,
I don't know. I can't speak for, like, some of those European carriers, but, yeah, I've seen that, like, where they go straight from, flying getting their basic stuff done, and then they go straight into, like, a ab initio program, and I always wonder that. I mean, I think it works out in the end, but then you see, like, these incidents that happen, and, they're just classic hand flying scenarios where you don't have automation. For example, like with the incident that happened in San Francisco with the 777 and the glide slope being out, well, now you can't do an ILS. You just have to visually fly the airplane, and sometimes that can kind of come to it's a realization that you have to go back to those early skills, like the foundation of flying, like the stick and rudder skills.
so
And
quick question. So, how often does the typical, and you can kind of probably just speak for the US, but how often does a typical airline pilot hand fly, whether it be landing or departure? Like, and are there restrictions per airline on how much that is?
No, they encourage us. In fact, they encourage us to fly as much as possible VMC. Now, there are certain approaches that you have to have the automation on for in IMC conditions, meaning instrument meteorological conditions. You can't. Your sole reference is the instruments, and you're doing a certain approach, like a Cat 2, an RMP. Like you have to have the automation on. But as far as VMC clearing a million, they encourage it as much as
Wow,
possible.
that's
And
good.
I mean, me personally, I kind of more or less like if it's a complicated departure, like for example, like leaving out of Boston, they make you do all these crazy turns and you have this beautiful view of the downtown. I like hand flying that because it's just satisfying.
Hmm.
But if it's just like a straight out, you're just climbing to 10,000 runway heading, or the first couple fixes are all just straight in the direction of travel. I'll turn it on too, like down low. Like I don't. It's just not a big deal
So
to
let me
me.
get this straight. So you're telling me that still to this day, being a captain for so long or a pilot for so long, commercial pilot, it still brings a smile to your face, like hand flying a good departure or
Oh
something like that?
yeah. Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah. Like San Jose, California has a nice departure. Like, 'cause you gotta
Mm.
kind of get above the hills, and so you'll take off and you'll do these like kind of swooping right turns, and you have max speeds you have to adhere to and stuff. So, I mean, you brief all these threats on the ground, so both you guys are on the same page, and you know what you're gonna do. And I usually go, "Hey, man, I'm gonna hand fly this as much as possible." Now, if the workload gets to where either one of us is not able to contend with it all, like it gets to the point where we're task saturated, then yeah, I'm gonna turn the automation on. But if it's nothing going on and we're just like doing a nice VFR departure, yeah, it's awesome. It's a great feeling. And flying the Airbuses to Boeing's, like I think the Boeings are a little bit more satisfying in that aspect.
Mm.
You just have more and the 7.3 in particular. Like it's funny because like going through the gamut, because I started on the 7.3, I went to the 7.5, which that was a nice dream come true.
I bet.
Flying the 7.6, and then going to the Airbus. That was really not by choice, but I was glad to learn it. And then coming back to the 7.3, it just like really makes you appreciate some of the 7.3 like hand flying aspects of it, because it is a really basic airplane in a lot of ways, like cables and pulleys.
Right.
So it's a tried and true airplane. That's why it's been around so long.
So instead of fly by wire, there's actual wires.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Actual cables. Right, right, right.
yeah, yeah. No, and we have to do that in the simulator. One of the lessons is all hydraulics off,
Wow.
where you have to actually hand fly it using just the cables and pulleys, and it takes both arms. Like, I
Wow.
mean, it's
Wow.
it's like stirring molasses, trying to just do a turn, like that base
Wow.
turn to intercept. Because usually they'll give it to you on the downwind. They'll kill both your hydraulics, and you got to do the two turns from downwind base to final, and it's a bear. It really is, and yeah, but I don't know, when you can nail it just right and you're not all over the place. It's pretty satisfying to know that if this were to happen, you can handle it no problem. Like you just got to mentally prepare for it. You get used to the uh, the force it takes. Like your brain just kind of adapts. Because I remember I did that lesson, and then like he turned everything back on. It was just like a regular takeoff then, and like I so over controlled it. 'Cause my brain, my
Are you
muscles were thinking, "Oh man, this is like no,"
uh,
and so it takes a while to calibrate back to just having hydraulics again.
are you trying to say those memes are correct where you see like the Airbus guy's got like a small arm and the Boeing guy's like a huge jacked up arm?
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, the 7.3, man, you're muscling that thing. If hydraulics felt really a lot more, but I mean, just in the movement alone, like I've had people tell me like the Airbus, like it doesn't look like you guys are doing much, and I go, you kind of are, but it's just so tiny of a movement, and it's just off to the side because the side stick's typically out of view of any kind of camera.
Right.
But it's just a different way of doing it. Like you're kind of nudging it along per se. And whereas the Boeings, you're making it do it. You're putting an aileron, rudder. Just not a lot of rudder, but like it's more bigger movements on the yoke, seeing that thing move around.
I have to think about the two different philosophies from two different manufacturers that's been going for how many years now? 30, 40 years or something?
Yeah.
Wow.
But
And
you
they're
know
still
what? Here's the thing about the Airbus. I appreciate the simplicity in the design. That is the one thing I got away from flying the Airbus. You look at it and you go, they looked at the Boeing, like particularly probably the 7.3, because the 320 and the 7.3 are very similar targets for market. And you look at how they overcame some of the same problems, or how they improved things over the way the 7.3 does it. And I appreciated how simplified they made it to the pilot. So that's one thing that I got away from that going, yeah, the Airbus, it's different. It's a different animal, different philosophy, different way of thinking, but in some ways I like the simplicity. It just, it was kind of satisfying to know that all this is kind of taken care of for you. Like because
Actually, this brings up a question. I mean to cut you. Is there more system studying on the Airbus versus the Boeing 7.3 on the 320? Is there more studying, like bookwork, knowledge-wise, to know the systems, or no?
I would say it's about the same.
Oh,
And that could be from airline to airline, but you generally go through a gamut of courses, starting, propulsion, air systems, fire extinguishing. Like they're just different modules you go through for every single one. The Airbus one, you have to be a little bit more of a because like when you get messages, you'll sometimes get multiple messages, and you have to kind of be able to figure out what's the underlying cause and not get overwhelmed by the amount of messages you're getting, like on the eCams. So that was one thing that I kind of had to learn. Like, okay, all these messages came up. Oh, it's because of this failure. This is
Mm.
the underlying, and they kind of prioritize it if you look at the way the eCam's set up. But anyway, yeah. Now I digress. It's a cool airplane. I have no qualms against the Airbus. I know some people go Boeing versus Airbus. Now that I've flown both, I can appreciate both for what they are. If you like hand flying, you like doing those, D crabs and the crosswinds and stuff. Like that's your Boeing's probably your jam on that. Like Airbus, you do it, but it's just not crazy. Like you're not doing these crazy movements and opposite aileron and rudder and all that. It's a little different, and so, but they're both satisfying to fly. I enjoyed flying the 321s particularly when I
So
flew it.
is that same like that same feeling, that same, I guess, satisfaction? Does that cross over to the 757 and 767, or how
Oh,
different is
yeah.
that?
So the 7.5, in my opinion, is the best hand flying airplane from the feel standpoint that I've run across. Coming from the 7.3, because that was like my first taste of the 7.5. Like for example, the brakes. I was always amazed at like how they could land at, like, for example, John Wayne. Just because it's just you're riding in this thing and it's so big, and you go, how is this thing gonna land on this tiny? It's under 6,000. I can't remember how long it is, but it's fairly short. Um, and it does it so great. And the first time I landed, I figured out why. The brakes are just amazing. I mean, you don't we don't even use reverse thrust at our airline because it's the brakes work so great. Like we just crack them. We
Wow.
what?
have them at idle. Yeah, and then if we need to, we can. But you just don't need to make all that noise because the brakes stop so quickly. And then the VREFs, the wing design on the 7.5 is really great. It flies at such low speeds for a big airplane. Like and you probably notice that if you fly the flight factor, you'll notice the VREF speeds are a lot lower than say like
Yeah,
a 737.
they're in the 130s, not the 140s.
Yeah, sometimes in the 120s.
Mm-hmm.
That always threw
Um,
me off. I was like, how the heck?
It's the wing. It's the wing. The wing of that airplane is really well designed. I mean, to this day, and I had this question one time with a sim instructor. I said, one of the things, and we have the older design cockpits, so we have steam gauges essentially. So like unlike the 7.3, like the NGs, where you can kind of see where like the hook is and stuff, like where you have like some sort of situational awareness on where you're gonna stall or where you're gonna fall out of the sky. On the 7.5, you really had no idea. Like it didn't it was nothing on the airspeed indicator that's gonna tell you,
Hmm.
right? And they say, you can use VREF 30 plus 100 or something to kind of have a mental idea. So I just wanted to do it in the sim to see how that, like, where does it stall at? And it was in the like really uncomfortably low airspeeds. And it's because that wing is just so good at making lift.
Wow.
And I mean, it would get your attention, like, because the deck angle is so high. I mean, we just let it go to where it was stick shaker, and then like it literally finally like started dropping, and we were like, I think we started like 35,000 feet or something like that, just for because he kind of said, hey, is there anything you want to work on? I was like, yeah, I've always been curious, like when does this thing stall at high altitudes? Like, because it's just a curiosity of mine. He's like, yeah, let's do that. So he put us at 35,000 feet. We killed the auto throttles, pulled it all the way to idle, and then we had the autopilot on initially, and just watching it as it gets slow and watching the airspeed drop bleeding off. And it was, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was really low. And the airplane was pitched up really high, which if that was going to happen to us in real life, I would have been like, whoa. But it's amazing how much lift it's producing, even at low speeds, to the point where and that's why they don't worry about it as much. So, but yeah, it's beautiful. And then taking it, the 7.5, we went to a lot of interesting places, like especially down south. South of the border, Central America, where all these volcanoes and high terrain and high density altitude, and it's like one of the few airplanes that can do the mission down there. It can carry the load, it can carry the cargo, and actually get off the runway with performance margins. And it's not the landing; it's really the takeoff that's the bigger factor. Because typically, when we're taking off, we're not just going to go for a short jaunt. We're going to go either to Atlanta or to LA or something like that. So it's got to carry like 4 or 5 hours of fuel. And it was just, yeah, it's a good airplane to do all that.
Wow.
Well, I know they developed the 7.5 and the 7.6 supposedly side by side. Which one do you think they had first, though? The 7.5 or the 7.6? You've flown the 7.6, correct?
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 76300.
Right. I mean, so based on you flying both, and how does the 7.6 feel in compared to the 7.5, even though they have the same content?
So I don't know when I think they came out almost simultaneously, but they're actually built in two different factories, if you didn't know that part.
Didn't know
Really?
that.
No.
Yeah, so Boeing has an Everett factory. I mean, they have another one in South Carolina now, but back when they were making these planes, all the big airplanes were built in Everett, the 7.4, the 777, the 787, all the wide bodies. And so the 7.6 is made in Everett, and the 7.3 is made in Renton, and so was the 7.5. So it's almost like two different teams building it. But anyway, back to the 7.6. The 7.6 is a big Cadillac. That's the best way I can describe it. It it's massive. I mean, you get in that thing and you just realize how wide it is. Like when you see yourself looking at a glass reflection, you're like going, "Holy Lord, like that's a lot of airplane behind me." But for as big as it flies very sensitively compared to the 7.5. Meaning you gotta kind of calibrate your hand to fly more with your fingers than your hand. Because it has these inboard ailerons that kind of deploy at low speed. So it flies a lot more agile than it looks for being that big. And in some ways I thought it was a little bit too much, like kind of artificial in some ways. To where you just but I enjoyed flying. It was a good airplane. The landing gear with the way it's kind of bent forward, it was really hard to get greasers with that thing. I mean, I think I was able to do it a few times, but
That explains it.
Yes, thank you for saying that. It makes us feel so much
it's
better.
like you think it's all coming together beautifully, and then all of a sudden it's like you just hear all the shutters in the back. And I was like, that was gonna be so good, and I don't
Wow.
know what happened.
Like my approach was perfect.
Yeah. No. Now, I mean, if you guys are just joining us, we're talking to Captain Chemtrails here. Me and Blue happened to be fortunate to meet him at Flight Sim Expo this year, and then we hooked up later on at Flyboy Rookie's house with the simulator, and where he proceeded to basically instruct us on how to fly this thing properly, the 737 simulator.
Yeah.
And so that leads
When I see disaster coming, I have to say something.
exactly. And that leads me into the instructing thing. I mean, you did it for a while to build your numbers, of course, I guess, but you're a natural instructor. I have to say that. I gotta compliment you on that. Like you're a natural instructor. You're not overly bearing, but you know how to
No.
interject.
Yeah, that's something that comes with a little bit of practice, I guess. I enjoyed instructing when I was in. I only really got to instruct, all the like private instrument commercial. I have a CFI, double I, and MEI, but I never got to instruct any kind of jet per se. Not yet, anyway. But that is one of my goals. I'd like to become a line check airman for my airline one day. You know, I enjoy it. It's good. Even as a captain, you know, you're always mentoring the guy in the right seat. And I had like last couple FOs have all kind of they pull me and say, "Hey, man, I really enjoy flying with you. You're like, you know, you're not, yeah, like you said, and I guess I'm not overbearing or something. Like I'll let you get away with certain things, but when it's looking like disaster's about to happen, I'm gonna say something. Like, I see this train wreck coming." And I think that comes with a lot, I guess, experience. You can let people make their own mistakes to kind of let them learn, but then obviously if it's something that's going to be big, you're gonna say something right away, nip that
Right.
in the bud. But no, I saw you guys kind of trying to figure things out and kind of just being overwhelmed at rookie sims. I was like, let me just step in, just give you a couple little tidbits as you
Bro,
guys are going through.
we were clueless, man. I mean, we fly the Zevo and stuff at home, but when you get in that real, like, physical sim and all the buttons are there, like, you know what to press, but in reality, we ain't know what the heck we were doing.
It was honestly overwhelming. It was
Yes.
overwhelming.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was. You know,
And that's the thing. That's probably like a difference between flying sim like on your, you know, desktop computer screen to flying a real jet. You know, it's the overwhelming sensations of seeing the physicality of the whole thing. Realizing the amount of mass and stuff that's going on behind you and all the physics and everything. It's I wouldn't say you ever quite get numb to it, but you kind of get used to it. Like um yeah, that's the best way I
just the
can
trim.
describe it.
Do you even hear the trim wheel sound anymore in your real life flying?
Oh, yeah, you do. Yeah, in the
You
7.3?
still do.
Yeah, it's right
Y-
next to you.
You never
What you
touch
don't
it though,
hear
right?
you don't hear the flaps or anything like that.
Right.
But, yeah, that trim wheel is right there, right next to you, and, yeah, if you don't hear it and you have your leg resting on it, your kneecap will let you know.
And
Nice.
you never actually physically touched the trim wheel, right?
Uh, there are scenarios, emergency scenarios where if you have to manually trim, you have to pull that handle out. Yeah, you do have to, but no, on a regular flight, if everything is working, no. No, you're hoping that you don't have to use it, but yeah,
I
it is
just
there. I mean,
I just got the Honeycomb Bravo, and that's for the first time I ever had a trim wheel, a physical one that I could touch and move. And I know, like in the GA planes, you do actually move that little
oh
trim
yeah,
wheel there.
no,
But
trimming's a big thing in most conventional airplane for sure. Yeah, that's
I
like
was
the
just like,
key.
should I touch it or should I leave it alone?
I no, you know, if we're just flying and the electrical trim is all working, yeah, we just use it on the yoke. You know, the little down, up and down switches on the yoke, and then that'll move the trim wheel. But no, it's not something we physically handle like
Gotcha.
an Cessna. No, no, but we see it moving, and the Airbus one moves too. Believe it or not, I don't know
Does
if you
it?
know. It
Oh
does.
yeah.
It's
Back in.
it's just a lot more sensitive, so it doesn't move very much, but it
Hmm.
does move.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So
Hmm.
this is the thing. Captain Chemtrails does have a YouTube channel. Other than social media stuff, we'll talk about that. But he does have a YouTube channel, and on it right now, he's got at least 4757 videos, where it's kind of like a mini instructional. I might describe it. I watched a couple of them,
I have not
and it's
seen
really.
it.
Oh
Looking
yeah,
it up now.
paste the link. Paste the link. But here's the deal,
Yeah,
guys.
so I looked at it as like there was nothing really out for the flight factor,
Right.
and I mean even myself before I flew the real thing. I think I don't remember if it was Flight Factor or maybe it was like something for P3D. There was a 7.5 out, but I was like completely clueless and there was no resources. And so it made me thinking like, And I don't want to make like a super long-winded video getting into all the technicals and everything else, but I just something to get you out of the gate, something to get you to the runway, something to take off. And I try to do it in little bite-sized segments, I thought. And I'm probably gonna do a couple more, probably like how you set up the approach, but I figured somebody wanted to see how the landing is done. So that
Hmm.
was like the most recent one I did just to kind of give you like what my thoughts are when we're landing and stuff. And no checklist, nothing crazy, like yeah, you don't want to get too in the weeds about it, but
Well,
just
believe it
something.
or not, it was a lot of information. You might not think it is compared to what you have to do in real life, but it was a lot of information for me to look at going, wow, this is a wealth of information here. And
Thank you.
so I've been trying to recruit Captain Chemtrails to actually become a 7.3 streamer on YouTube, live streams, and teach us some stuff. I
Yeah.
know that we already have Airbus simmers and V1 Sim who teaches good. We have Flight Deck to sim over here in Europe, but we need our own guy over here in the American airspace flying the Zebo and teaching us this stuff. I
I
mean, what do you
agree.
guys think?
Oh
What do you
yeah.
guys think in
Yeah.
chat? That's my question. What do you guys think in chat? Would you love to have Captain Chemtrails on live streams whenever you can? Teach
Yeah.
us how to fly the Zebo properly over here? Because I know I would love to see it.
I
What do you
would
say?
freaking love that.
Yep,
Oh man.
You want some you guys want some live streams? Okay. Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah,
We'd
yeah.
love to have some live streams. Look, we know there are people out there goes, yeah, you're not a real captain because a real captain would click this button first or last or something like that. But the rest of us would love to sit down and just watch somebody knowledgeable in the airplane fly it properly.
Yeah,
We
Sure.
have that for all the Airbuses. We don't have it
So,
for the Zebo
Yeah.
here.
I was
You
gonna
know?
say, to
Okay.
be honest, like I know XP is gonna disagree with me because we kind of touched on this before the stream started, but I actually think that I'm gonna tell you what to do, Captain Chemtrails. You need to also, in addition to making these live streams, make pre-recorded tutorials, because and I know a lot of other people out there
Yeah.
are more into get straight to the point. No intro, don't shout nobody out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No, thank you
That,
for the
that was my
donation.
initial.
Like
Yep,
none of
that was
that
my
stuff.
initial thoughts for the Flight Factor stuff when I
Yeah.
kind of did it. I'm very new to learning how to record and all that stuff. I can't do all the fancy stuff. Like, I mean, heck, you showed me X camera the other day on your stream, and I was like, "What? I gotta get this." I just feel so noob on that. Like, I go, "Oh wow!" Like,
I mean, you know,
so
it's
I'm still learning. I'm learning that stuff, and like, thankfully to you guys, that'll answer stuff on chat streams and stuff. Like, how'd you get that camera view? Oh, glad you asked that. Here it is. And I was like, "Oh, I'm sold."
but yeah,
Yeah.
I would personally definitely enjoy it, whether it's live or pre-recorded. I know pre-recorded takes a lot of work.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it would
yeah.
take.
In fact, it was funny on the pre-recorded 7.5 Flight Factor. I think that one I had to try a couple times just because I was kind of figuring it out as I went on the
Mhm.
takeoff video. And I think the one I actually recorded and put on, after I recorded it and I put it on there, I was like, oh crap, I forgot to put RTO, like the auto brakes. And sure enough, somebody had to like, I'm not a real 7.5 pilot, and I would have remembered that the RTO is not on or something like that. And I went, oh great, here we
Yeah.
go.
Here we go.
You're gonna get that comment. You're gonna get that. You gotta be ready for those
Yeah,
comments saying, "Oh,
yeah.
you're a real captain, but you forgot to turn on."
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
No, so I will definitely. I'm gonna put an effort for that. Yeah, I think it'd be good for the community just to have yeah. My original idea was to just have bite-sized 10-minute clips of certain segments. Maybe that's vital. That way you're not having to sift through like a 3-hour stream or something. But I will probably do live streams too if you guys want it.
Oh yeah, I would
'Cause, I mean,
love.
you're live at Flyway Rookies Simulator. I was watching when you were flying one time, and the amount of explanations you were giving us while flying, it was tremendous, man. I was like, whoa,
Yeah,
who's
just
this guy?
I throw
Yeah,
little nuggets out.
yeah.
I think the cool.
It helped.
I think the cool thing too is that I was kind of thinking as you were talking earlier, like we should have named this stream the Flight Sim Dream, or like the Flight Simmer's Dream,
Yeah.
something like that,
Right.
because you came from, like you said earlier, you started off as a flight simmer in FSX,
I
right?
did. Yeah. I mean, so like I was into aviation from an early age. I immigrated to this country and it was on a 747 that
Mm.
I got to see the cockpit and I was sold. And
Wow.
from then on, I would just kind of like, oh, what do I got to do? What do I got to I'm one of those guys that just wants to learn more, wants to just keep going down the rabbit hole, wants to learn, wants to learn. And I mean, I guess it got me to a certain spot. But like, yeah, flight sim was in its infancy, and I remember my neighbor had like the one on DOS, and I went, "Wow,
Jeez.
this is so cool!" And
Dawes.
I mean, and then 95 came out, and I was like, "Wow!" And ever since, I've been hooked on simming. Just as a general, just it kind of kept me excited for aviation because I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't like learn to fly. Didn't have anybody in my family really that I can talk to about it.
Mm.
And just kind of getting a little bit of knowledge is, and there was no YouTube back then. It was just trying to figure it out as your own, taking off out of Chicago MIGs. and just flying around. And I remember a couple people would come over to my house and they'd be like, "What are you doing? Just flying around?" I'm like, "Yeah." And I was like, "What's the point of that?"
Look at me now.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but
Again,
yeah, no, it started from that and it went to like FSX and,
wow.
2004 to FSX to P3D to, and I was resistant to X-Plane for the longest time. And then I finally jumped over and I like that. And I like 2020 and I like them all. I mean, heck, I'm learning DCS now and I'm like, this is a
Oh,
great.
wow.
We need to
Wow.
hook
Yeah.
up, my friend. We need to
Yeah.
hook up.
Yeah. No, that is
Couple
definitely not
of
my
right.
expertise, but I'm enjoying it, especially in VR. It's a great
Wow.
experience.
Oh, yeah.
Couple of talk about simulators. Couple of sim questions in the chat. Two of them. One from Spags was going. You've flown the Zebo, I suppose. How do you
Yep.
compare the Zebo with the PMDG? Because people always want to know. I don't have PMDG. I don't have
Um,
P3D.
which
So how is it?
PMDG would be the
The seven
question?
three, the 7.3, the
The
NG.
the well, there was different iterations of the 7.3, but and I don't think I've flown the latest one. I'd like to, but I just don't have P3D anymore.
Hmm.
But I think I flew the NGX, and for its time, it was pretty good. I think there's a lot more systems that are simulated. But from an aerodynamic standpoint, I think the 7.3 on the Zebo 7.3-800, the one that they update all the time, that is like a really good, like, I mean, couple of like tidbits I initially noticed when I switched over to the Zebo was just how it taxis, right? Like in P3D in a lot of airplanes, you have to apply power to keep, the taxi speed going, which in the real plane, if anybody's flown a real jet, the idle thrust on these things is in a 7.3 is enough to, once you get it breakaway thrust, you're pretty much, you don't want to ride the brakes, but it's picking up speed on its own at idle thrust. And I noticed that Zebo simulated that, and I went,
Hmm.
"Wow, like, that's really cool." And, like,
Hmm.
the first time I flew the 7.3, like, I think I was used to pulling the power out earlier when I was flying the PMDG stuff, and when I flew the real airplane, like, you don't wanna do that. You
Uh-huh.
definitely don't.
See, this is the kind of stuff I
And
love
so
to
and I
hear
noticed,
about.
like, the Zebo had that similar feeling, like, and I don't know if it's exactly 100%, but, like, the way you bring the power to idle in the flare and stuff, it feels very similar. And I mean, it's not, maybe it's not 100%, maybe it's gonna get, I think it's gonna get better and better, but from an aerodynamic standpoint, I think the Zebo is really good. Now, that being said, like, yeah, so systems, I tried to do like an RMP AR approach in it one time, and the whole approach just dropped out of the FMC, and I went, "Uh-oh."
Broke it.
So there's work to be done. There's work to be done, and it would be really nice if we can get ACARS functionality one day and all that stuff. There's a lot
It's
that can be
coming.
done.
It's
Yeah, it
coming.
And how about the 7.5? Tyler Smith asked about the 7.5. How similar or different is it from the real world?
7.5, the one that was on P3D, I can't remember who made it. I think it was Captain Sim. It was okay, but the Flight Factor one was a little bit better. But the thing about the 7.5 is there's different variants, and even the 7.3, like Boeing, they make improvements, make software, and I think some of the FMC stuff in the Flight Factor one is kind of older. Like for example, you cannot change the descent speed if you're in VNav and you're trying to descend and you have this some cost index that, and you look at the speed page and it shows something really low like 270. In the real plane, you can change that. You can put like 0.79/300 and boom, good to go. And I don't know if that was something in the real airplane that we just got upgraded to, and maybe it wasn't implemented on the original 7.5, so I don't know where that delineation is. But you can't do that on the Flight Factor. You have to go in and change the cost index, which it just kind of threw me for a loop the first time I
Hmm.
saw that. I'm like, why can't I change this? So yeah, but from a flying standpoint, it's not. It doesn't quite do the 7.5 justice. I think if they were able to make one that flew aerodynamically good, I think you would see it being better than Zebo. Like it's that good
Wow.
in real
Gotcha.
life. Yeah,
Wow.
it's a lot more a desired airplane in real life, and I wish that translated to the Sims, but for the most part, it's okay. It's not quite there, but the Zebo has made quite a big stride.
Yeah.
And then compared to PMDG, I would have to fly probably the latest one to really see how it feels. But I flew, I think, the second generation PMDG one.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about how, just like what they said in chat, how the 7.5 and 7.6 kind of live up to the real world standards when it comes to in the sim. Because I mean, a lot of us love the plane, and we love to fly it, and we know that it's it's not perfect, it's not Zebo, but still, like I mean, I think you kind of clarified there that it's I guess it has a way to go to kind of really give you that essence of a 7.57.
Yeah, one of the things, like when I was at Flight Sim Expo with you guys, I went to Ramsey's and I kind of just said, "Hey," and he's the guy behind a lot of the Flight Factor stuff. Can you guys just update the Flight Factor 7.5? And his answer was like, "Really? Do we need to?" I was kind of like, I mean, he didn't know who I was, so I just kind of said, I think a lot of guys would appreciate it. But he was so, they're about to release a 777, which that's good too, because X-Plane really needs a 777,
Oh yeah,
a good one.
and yeah, absolutely, and a good 7.8. But
Yeah,
Yes.
there's a
yeah, it's
lot.
true.
And a good 7.4 that doesn't lose its avionics on final.
That was pilot error. I'll take the blame for that one from just not SSG. Somebody asked, Rickenzie was like, "Hey, do you find if you fly the sim and goes you back to the basically is asking if you go from flight sim and desktop to the real world, do you have any kind of issues at all?" Just
That just kind of like what Blue was harking back to, is that initial overwhelming sensation of seeing physicality and seeing the switches, and you're just kind of taken aback by that initially. And that sort of happens in the real world too, but we don't go from just, we don't just learn about it on our computer and then hop in the real jet. Like, we have a progression usually when we're going from jet to jet, where it starts with a home study course for systems, and you come in, you do your systems tests, and then you go into procedures and learning flows and doing just running checklists, running the flows. Then you get into the full motion, then you're doing emergency procedures, then you're doing, gate to gate flying at the end of it. And so by that point, you're just used to seeing the physical switches.
Hmm.
And then you get into the real jet. Now you're looking at the physical outside world, which it still kind of gives you that kind of initial shock and awe. But if you go from that transition, and like I said, even if you leave a level D sim with the type rating, until you fly the real jet, they're still not quite the same experience. But it gets you to that certain level where you're comfortable with where the switches are. You know how to do your flows. You know how to do your procedures, and then you kind of like can focus on learning to fly the airplane itself.
Have you
Um,
have you ever had that? This is probably just me, and this is I'm not a pilot, but I've had this feeling as a passenger because I sim so much, and one of the things that you miss is a lot of people say that seat of the pants feel, right? The vibrations of the plane and the engines, but then also the sense of distance and height. Do you ever get like go from the sim and maybe way back in your training, probably when you were a lot like earlier in your career, but just be like, holy crap, I'm like 30,000 feet high.
it
Like,
wasn't necessarily the 30,000 feet high part. It's when you're coming in at like 140, 150 knots and you see the ground rushing up fast at you. That is definitely adrenaline pumping in real life, more so than the sim, I would say.
wow.
Like, I know the first time, like, I did like an ILS approach to Mints, right? Like, you're looking at the you're looking at the META, you're looking at the ATIS. It's overcast 300, which that could mean less or more depending. And sure enough, you're coming in and you're passing 500 feet, still IMC, 400 feet, still IMC, approaching minimums, and then bam, runways like coming out. I mean, that, and then you get the speed and everything. I mean, that in real life is there. I don't know. There's no substitute that I've found yet. Even in VR and everything in 2020, it just VR does definitely take it to a different level. I will say
Right.
that, because and it depends on what VR headset you have. Like, I have the HP Reverb G2, and for 2020, for example, you really get a sense of how big the cockpit is,
mm-hmm,
and you
mm-hmm.
get that, and that just adds to the realism, which I think is good. And I think hopefully Flight Sim will get to that point where you're looking through a 4K VR headset and you're getting all those feels. But I guess you're just the one last thing that you'll be missing is that sensation, the G's and everything else. But visually, it's becoming very close.
Wow. Here's a hard-hitting question for you. Coming from the Airbus back to the Boeing, do you miss the tray table?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you watch some of my Instagram stories, I think I sometimes make references to that because I'll like
Oh my god.
I'll have my meal with this big old yolk in my way, and I'll be like, "There's times like this where I miss that tray table."
That's a question from V1 Simi's in the chat. What's up, V1? He
Hey,
goes, yeah, ask him if he misses the trade table.
big shout out to V1. I like his stuff too. He's a good guy. But yeah, no, the tray table, that was probably my favorite feature of the Airbus. It was yeah. But
Wow.
some guys have it out the whole flight. I couldn't do that for some reason. I would just hit my knee on it and just if I wasn't using it to eat or write something down, I would put it away. And I had this like habit pattern of having a piece of paper in front of me. So on the Boeings, I clip it to the yoke. There's a yoke clip. And when I went to the Airbus, the funny story is I kind of try to do the same thing with the Airbus. There's a clip on the tray table. Well, since I store it all the time, the first couple times I did it, it ripped my paper off.
Uh,
And I'm like, okay, I got to come up with a different way to do this. Because, typically when you're flying airliners, you're not doing just one flight. You're doing multiple flights and you have different flight numbers and you kind of got to write stuff down if they have amended clearances, all that stuff. So I like having a physical piece of paper to write that stuff onto. Some guys don't, but that's just me. And I was so used to the yoke that was like a lesson hard learned. But I figured out a way to overcome that. I found a little crevice on the side, right where the speaker is on the side of the Airbus, and I folded the piece of paper to clip, just kind of fit right underneath there. And there's really no airflow or anything to get it out of that wear, and it stayed there, and I could kind of just glance down there if I needed to. And yeah. So that was just it was funny because I didn't expect that. Like I put it on the trip.
Multi-million-dollar machine. You got to find a
Yeah,
little
it ripped
crevice
my
to stick
paper
your
off, and I
paper.
was like, "Oh, great! Now I got to get another piece of paper. I got to figure something else to figure that." I don't know how other Airbus guys. I'd be curious how V1 does it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I like having a physical piece of paper, and some I guess some guys they just have the tray table out the entire time. Because,
Wow.
but like you can have there's nothing like it was designed to be out for takeoff landings and everything else. But it does feel funny to me having that thing
Really?
just in your lap. Yeah, oh yeah, you don't have to put it in.
Oh, I thought you
hmm.
had to store that thing.
No,
Interesting.
no, it's designed for takeoff and landing, and yeah, you can have it there the whole time. But like for me, I'm not like a tall guy, but like I don't know, my knees hit it sometimes. Maybe I sit kind of high in the seat, or I don't know. I just thought if I'm not using that, store it, pull it out, eat, put it back in, and so I had to figure out a way around the yoke clip thing that I was used to.
I mean, see, Blue, you have to store your tray table in the back when you're flying, but
Yeah.
they can keep it out if they want.
Yeah, yeah. No, if
You,
you look at that, I mean,
wow.
Blue, you work at the ramp now, so you can probably have access to like getting in the cockpit now. But if you go actually pull it out, you'll see that it's a pretty sturdy piece of hardware. I mean, it's solidly. It's not like the flimsy tray table that the passengers have in the back. It's a very solid piece of
Yeah,
engineering.
they don't want me in the
Here's
cockpit. I'll never leave. So
here's a
What's
question.
funny, Blue? You're a ramper, and
yeah,
I just a little side note. I used to be a ramper, and
really.
I think it's a good avenue to kind of just stay motivated, be around that stuff. And I could tell by your stories that you're pumped, you're
hmm.
excited every time you work there.
Yep.
Yeah, just being around it, even because I used to be a ramper. Work the CRJs and the SOBs, so that kind of dates me a little bit. But so I used to work the night shift, so we'd clean the airplanes. But yeah, I'd just sit in the cockpit
The
sometimes. Be like,
Ron,
"Ooh."
right? The Ron.
Yep, the Ron
Ah,
flight.
the Ron.
I'd work the Ron flights. I'd clean the cabin real quick, and then I'd just kind of sit in the cockpit and go, "Whew, this would be kind of cool." And
Stories,
I
man.
have friends. I have a lot of I can relate to those guys because like I've done that job, and so like, and I have a couple friends that are rampers. Shout out to like Pilot Porter, which actually that's a funny story in itself. The way I met Pilot Porter, which he's actually a good friend of mine to this day, was he took a picture of me. He was just one of those guys that take photos of airplanes, and it was in John Wayne. He was working the ramp there, and he took a photo of us parked because typically John Wayne you take off 20 right. That's the normal flow of things, the offshore winds and all that. But there's some times where you're just too heavy to make the noise abatement, so you have to request a 2 left departure,
Hmm.
which I'm sure ATC loves to hear because they basically got to clear the airspace for you to take off opposite direction of everybody else.
Wow.
Didn't
So
know that. Wow.
yeah, no, and then the funny thing is like I was fairly new to John Wayne at the time and the procedures, and I was flying with this captain, and he goes, "Yeah, from time to time, John Wayne's a great place to fly in and out of, but from time to time we get this little issue where you have to do it opposite direction. Obviously, tailwind limitations, like you have limitations you have to do, but if you're within the tailwind limitation, they prefer you to do it that way. Anyway, so we had to wait on the opposite of the runway, and John just happened to be there with his camera, and he took a photo. And at the time, I was fairly new on the 7.5, and I'm like, oh my god, like, I didn't know John, but like another guy that worked the ramp said, "Hey, this is Captain Chemtrails. Like, I'm gonna send this to him." And I was like, "What? This is cool. Like, you took a photo. Like, that was the pilot on that
You
plane."
took a
And
photo.
so yeah, I he connected with me over that photo, and then we just been good friends just over multiple things, but like especially during the pandemic and stuff, just playing. I mean, I've worked with him one on one on flight sim and stuff. We'll just fly, and I'll teach
That's
him things
so
about the
cool.
Zebo. Yeah, so he's been a good friend. But just started from that one photo. So, and that's another thing about aviation. Like, you just never know who you're gonna meet,
Never
who's
know.
gonna yeah. Like you have all these and that's one thing I wish the simming. I mean, the simming world, it's very small, but and then like Flight to Mexico, like getting to meet you guys was really cool. But in the real world, I mean, you run into all kinds of people and different things, and touching stories. And like one time, I had this whole family on board my plane, and I knew they were all together because they're wearing like the same shirts. And the very last person to get off the airplane was the grandmother, and she comes up to me and she goes, "I just want you to tell me that, like, I have 4 generations of my family on this airplane, and so thank you for getting me here." And it was just a simple thing,
Wow.
but yeah, like, I still
Wow.
remember that to this day. Like, I was
That's
like, "Wow." Like, things like that, yeah, you never forget. We've
glad
done
you
a
told me
couple
after the
flights.
fact.
Yeah, a
Mm.
couple of flights for Make-A-Wish Foundation, stuff like that. You run into the kids that wanna be pilots, and yeah, it's really cool, really cool. I'm always like, "Come up, say hi." If you know me, come up, say hi. Well, obviously, if we're in a tight spot where you got to get out the airplane in time and stuff like that, it's probably better if you come after the flight. But yeah, if you come around the corner and you see me there, like, hey, come up, say hi. I'm very inviting.
And that's the thing, is like I said to myself when I met you at Flight Sim Expo, I'm like, what would make a real world captain go to a flight simulator expo? You know what I mean? True, but getting to know you and talking to you, the passion that you have for just aviation in general, no matter what part of it is crazy, man. You know, and so yeah, we need you to spread that love on, man. Bring it to
Yeah, I
a
guess I
live
never
stream, man.
really
Do it.
thought of it as something being abnormal or rare or anything like that. I because I guess I was a simulator person at first, and I always said, "Yeah, I gotta go to one of these Flight Sim expos. It just seems really cool," and everybody's just geeking out because I like that stuff too. But I do find, yeah, some of the real guys, if you say that to them, like if you tell your first officer or whoever you're flying with, like, "Yeah, did you hear about Flight Sim expo?" They're gonna look at you funny. I mean, they're probably gonna give you this like raised eyebrow, like what?
You're like,
But
you're like, I
but
hope.
it's cool. I don't know. I like it. I've enjoyed it. It's been a part of me for a long time, off and on. Like whenever I couldn't fly the real airplanes, like when I was in the military, and when I was just trying to, like, it was just a dream, right? And that was the one way that you can kind of fulfill it in some way, right? It may not be actually flying a plane, but you can hop in PMDG or Zebo or whatever, and kind of get a taste of what maybe that might feel like. And it was just motivation, and yeah, and then I just took it to the next level. I just kept going. I mean, I try to encourage that to all the guys that, like, follow me and stuff. I'm like, just keep going. Don't stop. Don't get into a rut. Like if you get into a rut, like figure out how you can get out of this rut. Like, because
So
whether it's the biggest thing is financial, right? Like, yeah,
yeah.
figure out a way. Figure out a way.
So,
There's so many ways. Like my way was the military. I didn't have a lot of money. Funny stories. I learned to fly when I was 15, soloed when I was 16, and then ran out of money.
oof.
And I figured out that was the number one factor that's gonna keep me out of the cockpit is money. But I go, okay, what can I do? What can I do to change this? How can I fix this? How can I? And I didn't get any scholarships. I was trying to go on to the Air Force Academy, got told no. Tried to get an ROTC scholarship to join the Air Force, got denied.
Hmm.
I looked at Embry-Riddle, like some of the major aviation universities that I knew of at the time, and then I looked at the tuition. I went, "There's no way, can't do this. Um, and so I just looked at other things, thought outside the box, and went, if I went to the military for a few years, right, and have because I went as an aircraft helicopter mechanic, so I was like, it's a good backup plan, right? Maintenance. You get to learn a little bit about the maintenance side of the house. You get to be a mechanic. That mechanical like knowledge is going to serve you well into the future. But then they're also, you get out of the military, you have the GI Bill, you get that money to kind of get going. And so that was my way of overcoming that financial hurdle that I think a lot of guys kind of get held into. But there are scholarships now. There's a lot more things out there, but you really just got to do your research. I mean, I didn't have internet or anything. I didn't back then. It was just kind of trying to figure it out on your own. So, but there are ways. There are ways, and I enjoy trying to help people out like that. Like, hey, I heard about this scholarship. You guys should apply. It's like do it. I mean, at least apply. If they're gonna tell you no, they tell you no. Then you move on to something else.
Wow.
So, but yeah,
I'm so
Yeah,
glad you
I'm here
shared
riveting and
that.
listening. Jeez.
I'm so
Yeah.
glad you shared that story because I was literally just about to ask you, like, what are some of the challenges that you fought to get to where you are, and you just explained all of it perfectly. And I hope the right people were listening today because I know one of the most difficult parts about getting into aviation is obviously the financial hurdle. It's not like you can't learn the knowledge. It's not like you
well,
can't
I think
physically
there's
do it.
there's there's plenty of people that have the intelligence level, and the discipline, and just lacking a little bit of the financial resources. And I really try to go out of my way to try to help steer them in a direction maybe they didn't think about with that. And to me, it gives me enjoyment, like seeing them actually realize it if they do find stuff like that, and it helps them out. And there's no one path though. That's the thing. Like I know my story and I know how I did it, but that may not work for you. That might be a different financial. Like I get all these questions all the time. Like I want to go to the best aviation college, blah blah blah. I'm like, well, where do you live? First off, because like let's start in your home area, see what's
Mm.
around. Go to your local airport, talk to people. It's like start locally. Don't just think right away like, oh, I need to go to here to here to here. And a lot of those schools are really good too, but if it's going to be out of your budget, if it's going to put you, out of your local area, I mean, you can't afford to live out, you don't know how you're going to live out there and all that. I mean, why go through that stress? Why not start fresh, like what's around you? And so that's kind of like I got out of the military at Fort Hood, Texas, and I was thinking, okay, where am I going to go to school at? Am I going to go back to California, where I'm originally from? Am I going to go to school in Florida? And I just literally got in the car. I knew there was Cessnas landing at this little tiny airport, and I just drove there. And there was a big sign that said college. I was like, hey. Went inside, said, do you guys see the job bill? They're like, yep, we have for the last 50 years. And I go, perfect. Like, and you just don't know unless you take that step to kind of figure it out. And it worked out, but it may not work out for you, like my story, my schools, it's just part of my story, but you can
Here,
figure it out if you really look.
here's a question. Do airlines care what school you went to learn how to fly, or is it just that you have the credentials?
That's
Do
a
they
good
care?
question. And I'm going to say it's the culmination of the end product, the attitude of the person. The where you got the degree from may contribute to that, but if you come in there with an arrogant attitude, it doesn't matter where you went to school at. If you came in there without like, you got to have that humbleness, a willingness to learn, down to earth personality that somebody else that flies with you is going to get along with, and that I think is not something that's taught in a school. It's just something you have to experience through life and whatever else. And that has more of a play than what shows up on your paper. Now, do they want the degree? Yes, they're gonna want the degree. I mean, there are places or there are guys that I know that have been hired without degrees, but the name of the game right now is you got to have a degree. And I know I get that question a lot too. Do I need a degree? Well, as of right now, yes.
What kind of
I
degree
know.
are you talking about, though?
Anything. That's the great thing. Like it has changed. Now, if you got your degree in aviation, it's good. I don't think it's not a bad idea, but a lot of guys will typically tell you to get something in something else so you have something to fall back on. But it just has to be a 4-year accredited school, and that's just the requirements that the major US carriers have currently. So, and I don't think that's gonna change. That hasn't changed in a very long time. In fact, it just depends on the competition, right? If there's a lot of pilots and not many jobs, then they get really strict. They ratchet the requirements, and they figure out ways to weed people out of the interview process. And one of the big things, and I've talked to several recruiting departments for the legacy carriers, and one of it's big the degree, right? And but who knows? That might go away. But like, do you want to bank your future on that? No, I wouldn't. Um,
Yeah.
it's like one of
Wow.
those things. Like, yeah, but yeah, get it in anything. You don't have to get it in aviation. I mean, I think. And the reason why I got it in aviation was this: when I got out of the military, the GI Bill, they would only cover your courses that's part of a degree plan, right? And so there was no other degree that would cover my flight training other than an aviation degree. Because, like, for example, the private pilot was a course that was part of the aviation degree plan. So, being that it was a course, the GI Bill would pay for that. And so that was the reason why I did it. And it's kind of how I did that. In fact, I got to funny story is I kind of like thought out of the box again. There was like I was trying to get a second. Trying to figure out a way to pay for my double I and MEI, and I used it as an elective for a degree in aviation management that I didn't even finish. But it was a way that I could get the GI Bill to cover my double I MEI. So
Nice.
so there are ways if you just think a lot. And then it's funny because it took a lot of approvals and stuff like that. And then other guys tried to do it and they got turned down. But I was like, hey,
You got in. You're the
yep,
last one.
yeah.
Is
Mhm.
there ever really a pilot shortage? Because I've just heard that all the time,
There's
years.
a shortage of qualified individuals. That's the problem. I mean,
Ah,
it's not a shortage of desire. There's not a shortage of people that want to be pilots or private pilots. It's what I notice, and I do orientation flights for like younger, high school age cadets, and it's the not it's some of them just don't want to go through all the process, and that's what I see. And I'm a little fearful for the future and how that's going to produce. I mean, there are people that I know that are, like me, they want to be pilots for as long as they can remember, but getting a lot of people enticed and then making sure that they're going to follow through and go through all the steps and go to school and go through the whole thing. Cause I've had people tell me like, I want to be a pilot, but I don't know if I want to go through all the schooling. I don't know if I want to do this and that. I'm like, maybe it's not for you. They, you
okay.
gotta have the passion. I'm sorry. You just gotta have the passion, the desire, and then you gotta figure out how to, overcome all the obstacles that are gonna stand in your way. Because if you don't have that, then you're probably gonna not be happy. And there's some guys that are like they tell like they wanna be a 777 captain. Like that's they're never happy till they get there, you know? I just enjoy the journey. If I'm flying a Cessna, whatever it was, like when I was in college, I was flying 152s. I competed in the flight team, NIFA events. I had a blast. And then I instructed. I had a lot of good students. And then like seeing some of those students go off and do great things. Like I have one that's flying like B1s, one's flying, fighters. And it's just like cool to see that and go like he had a part in that. Like I've just enjoyed the process. And I just, I knew the pay has gone up quite a bit recently, but like when I was flight instructing, it wasn't very high. Starting pay at regionals, that wasn't very high. So it was just a lot of sacrifices, but I enjoyed still the lifestyle. I enjoyed flying at the regionals. I enjoyed going to some of the places because some of the people I went there with. So it's just be
Wow.
happy wherever you're at. Like doesn't matter if it's a 172 or a 777. I see that a lot of times where people are just not happy until they get to that wide body, and it's like, I don't know, man. Whenever I get there, I get there. I don't think about the. I, I like sometimes when people say, "Hey, Captain," I kind of like look around, like, who are they talking about? Oh, they're talking about me.
Wow. It's the attitude, man. Wow. Let me ask you about the 1,500-hour rule. I mean, I thought I heard rumblings that you're trying to get Congress to change it or roll it back to something less than 1,500 hours. What do you think about that? Um,
Um,
it's a huge
so I
deterrent.
kind of, I kind of went right into that. Like when I started flying, when I got out of the military, guys were getting hired with just a few hundred hours.
Wow.
And it pained me because I went, that could have been me had I not gone in the military and, wasted. I thought at the time, like, wasted because these guys were about the same age as me and they were leaving to the airlines and I was getting out of the military and just Mr. Student Pilot. Like, I went through 3 or 4 different flight instructors. And I think the statistics speak for themselves. Like, there hasn't been an incident since that rule went into effect. So you can look at it that way. Has it made the process harder? Yes. But I think the original intent was to get some real world experience, right? Just get out there, fly something for a bit, learn some of the fly in some weather, fly something with 2 engines or something, turbine, and get that experience to where you can fall back to that, right? That goes back to the hand flying skills and everything else and thinking critically until until you're put into situations, right? Like emergency situations, and it's like you have to kind of go back to your hand flying skills a lot of times. And if you have nothing to fall back to because you got hired with 300 hours, I don't know. I don't think that's enough. But is it a good thing overall for the industry? Yes. Is it a good thing for airline pilot recruitment? No.
Hmm.
I wish, but there, it's different ways, right? If you're just purely coming off the street, it's 1,500 hours. If you go to an approved 2-year school, I believe it's less than that. It's 1,250 or something.
Oh,
And
didn't
if
know
you
that.
go to an aviation school, which I guess is a good recruiting for the aviation colleges, an approved school that it's can go down to 1,000, I believe.
Wow.
And there's a breakdown of like what you have to do, but I mean, I think 1,000 is pretty reasonable in my personal opinion. 1,500 might be a little bit excessive, but 1,000. I think by 1,000, I felt pretty good. But then again, I was humbled as soon as I got to the airlines. So I got hired about 1,300 hours. I was kind of quasi in that range. Um, because at the time when that rule came out, they were not saying who was going to pay for an ATP. The rule stipulated you had to have an ATP, and this was before the restricted ATP. So I was thinking, going, I kind of barely went through all this stuff without accumulating too much debt. Like now, if I have to pay for a level D simulator to get typed on something before I get on with an airline, that's gonna put me in the poorhouse. So I was just doing whatever I could to meet whatever mins the airlines were looking at the time, and it was going up. It was an ascending carrot at the time, because I remember going to a regional job fair, and I think I thought I was pretty good at like 680 hours or something like that. And I had like 40 something multi, and I think the requirements were like 700 hours and 50 multi, and I was just shy of all that. And they were like, "Nope, like
Jeez.
sorry,"
Oh.
and then I would get that time, and then I'd call them or I'd send an email, and I'm like, "Hey, I got 700 hours." Like, "Oh, no, it just went up to 900." Now
Jeez.
it's 1,000. Now it's ATP, written also required, and then, it was like, "Oh my god, this is just getting really, really hard
Wow.
to reach it." And what I ended up doing, though, is I instructed at a second job. So I was working the ramp job, and I quit the ramp job to go flight instruct on the weekends. So, basically, I had 7 days of exposure of flying. So, that
7 days.
was able that basically, that kicked on the nitrous, and I was able to hit about 1,300 hours, and I got a couple calls from airlines, and I got to get on at that time.
So besides doing instructing before getting into the airlines, did you do any other commercial flying?
Yeah, oh, well, a little bit here and there. The college, had a 310, and they would use it too. Like if it was, we had a lot of satellite campuses around the area, and it was just too time consuming and sometimes expensive to just send somebody to another town in Texas, because you would have to like fly to Houston and go somewhere else, and like, so they'd be like, "Hey, hop in the 310 and go." So I would always like, once I had a like, I don't know, can't remember how much time exactly, but I was fairly confident in flying it, and basically the chief flights were like, "Shane, go take the 310 out, go take so and so to this place," and so I would kind of go from there.
And
So it was very little though. It wasn't at much. I didn't get too much right seat time and a lot of things. Like I got to fly King Air once. It was awesome, but it was just a little.
that's my dream right there, the fly
Taking
King Air.
air. Oh,
King
yeah.
Air's
That's
really cool. Really, it
that's
was a 350. It had all the bells
ooh.
and whistles. It was
Oh
brand
yeah.
new at the time. and it was a former chief instructor for the school. He kind of would just basically snag CFIs and do right seat stuff with them, and so I got snagged to go fly somewhere with him, and I was like, oh, this is awesome.
That sounds so cool. Like you get to a certain point where you have this much experience, and in other, you know, senior pilots just snag you, like you say, and just like, hey, let's go on a trip.
Yeah, yeah, no, and those start happening. I'd say a couple milestones, probably like at 500 hours, things start happening like that, and then 1,000 hours too, where you're, recently, and yeah, it just happened. But I would say the first couple 100 hours was the hardest thing to just kind of get done. When getting your commercial, your single engine, and multi. I mean, you're just in the training world, not doing any fun flights per se. I mean, some guys will do fun flying. It depends if you go to a 61 school or if 141. But I went to a 141 where it was all regimented and lesson plans and all that. So to get out of the training world and just fly a fun flight somewhere like A to B was cool. It was
And
really cool.
for the military though, so somebody in chat was saying this. I believe that 1500 rule is brought down if you've come out of the
So
military.
that's if you are a military pilot.
Right,
I was
pilot.
not. I was not a military pilot. I was a mechanic. I was an enlisted guy. I didn't have a degree, so that rule wouldn't have no weight to me. But yeah, if you that is correct. I think it's like 750. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but I believe if you're a military pilot, because one thing a lot of people don't realize is the military pilots don't fly a lot, especially the fighter community. The C-17, C-5 guys, they might fly quite a bit more, but the fighter jet, if you think about it, like, they don't stay in the air very long. They're typically doing 1-hour sorties, because fuel consumption and all that stuff. So unless they're, like, taking a fighter jet from the East Coast to Europe or something like that, they don't get too much long haul flying.
Gotcha.
And, so typically, even after multiple years of service in flying like F-18s or something, like, they don't have much time. They really don't, not compared to like a guy. But it's good quality time, don't get me wrong. I mean, flying an F-18 for 700 hours is quite a bit of time that I'd be jealous of.
Yeah, I saw
Um,
an interview somewhere with I think it was a F-16 pilot. He was talking about that lower, hour count getting into airlines mainly because they fly less, but they have to be more precise in every way. Like I mean, nothing against airline pilots, but it's just a higher quality of flight. You know what I'm saying? Like it's more than just
it's
takeoffs and landings.
it's
It's like
different. I will say, like, I've flown with a couple military guys, been my first officers now, and the biggest challenge they have is the pace of the operation. Um, they're used to having everything kinda catered, more say, to them.
Wow.
Like, meaning, like, they have their support people that help them out with their suits and everything else. They get to the runway, they're the big show, like, the tower knows about their flight, they clear them to go, and then they get to Atlanta, and you're just one of 50 in line for takeoff, 8 right.
I
And just
can't imagine.
it's kind of like they're a little lost a little bit, but they pick it up. They figure it out. They realize that they gotta crank it up 'cause they're not used to all the radio transmissions, all the stuff that, and it's kinda, I look back to the same thing I kinda face too. There's just a lot more you have to contend with in the airline world with, the busyness and the pace of the operation, versus the fighter jet stuff, like the takeoff and the landings, like, kinda, I think, more or less, not a huge event. I mean, obviously they have their weapon systems and dealing with warfare, which is a totally different side of the house. But
Right.
V1 in chat says their biggest challenge is when to contact ramp control.
see, that's what I'm saying. Exact V1's right. He's right.
I have
My
no
Because like a
idea
God.
what
lot
it
of
means.
times I would look to see in COM 2 if the guy has the ramp frequency set right. Like, you got that set? Because I'll forget. And then we're just like fumbling, going to ground, like, okay, we're going to ramp 2. And then heaven forbid the gate changed.
God. Wow.
So, but yeah, no, and it's more, they figure it out. They do figure it out eventually. My experience is it just that I've heard it numerous times from guys that are like, I didn't realize how busy all this stuff is. Like, it just, the pace of operation, just getting from the gate to the runway can be just a
Mm.
lot for somebody that's not used to it to kind of overcome. And yeah, and like taxiway, all the complicated taxiways, like, if you're in the military, you're probably on this long runway that's and the hangar's like right by the end of the runway, and you just hop in the jet and you go to the runway. Whereas like you go to places like Boston, you got to go hold short of this runway, and then a bunch of different instructions to this runway to hold short, and then contact this ground at this taxiway. So they just that throws them for a loop, is what I notice. But
Seems
they
as if
figure it out.
seems as if they need to incorporate VATSIM into their training regimen there. Get them on VATSIM, man. Seriously.
I will say that I am impressed by VATSIM a lot of the times.
Oh, yeah.
I initially did pilotage because I just wanted that more authentic experience, and I mostly did SoCal stuff. But yeah, VATSIM controllers are have gotten really good over the last
They
couple of
really
years.
have.
Like when I first did VATSIM a long time ago, it didn't impress me very much. It was just kind of like it seemed very kind of amateur hour, and I didn't really lean into it. But VATSIM has come a long way, I will say, and they're really trying to push that realism factor into a lot of things. And it's busier in general. I think there's just more people flying on VATSIM now,
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
definitely.
especially when you guys do live streams.
Congo lines
It's a
of
headache,
traffic.
headache. Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm doing cross the pond in 2 days, and just reading the briefing on it alone, I started getting nervous. Like, what the hell am I doing? Oh yeah, they
Oh
have a
yeah,
whole they have a whole
yeah.
PDF for JFK, for the Tricon, for the what do you call it, the NAT going over, and then when you get to Europe, it's like,
That's good stuff. I mean, all that stuff I learned firsthand in the real planes. And, like, I didn't know
Wow.
what a HF radio was. I didn't know all the procedures. I mean, this was back before CPDLC doing HF stuff across the ocean. Yeah, it was all new to me. I learned as I went, but getting that early exposure to it, like procedurally from a simming, that's good stuff. I mean, it's especially for the guys that are trying to come up and do this in real world. You guys are gonna get to the airlines, and be like, oh yeah, I've done this before. I know exactly what to do. You know,
Cam in chat says actually they have some real world controllers now on VATSIM.
yeah,
Sometimes they do it.
that's probably why, and that carries over. Yeah, I've been very impressed by VATSIM, to the point where I went, pilotage was cool. I enjoyed it. I did a lot of the missions and stuff, like all the, I think I forget what they call those things,
Cat
where
ratings, I
yeah,
Yeah,
ratings, all that
cat rating.
stuff.
That's right, the cat rating system. I just wanted to just do them, just to do them, and then I kind of went, I don't know what else to do now, so I went back to VATSIM, and I was impressed, like how VATSIM has progressed over the last couple of years, and so it's
So
good.
how
It's good.
how many real world flight hours do you have?
Oh, good question. I mean, just a rough estimate, I would say probably right around 7,000 hours.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
you know the
Uh,
planes breakdown of that, different
What's
plane.
that? Oh, the breakdowns.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, I could look it up. Give me one sec. I'll look it
Oh
up real
wow.
quick.
You have like an app? Oh, my app.
I do like a log 10 Pro.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it's electronic. Like, it's funny because I thought I was a little nerdy about it because I was so, like, for the airline interview, I was so nervous thinking that they're gonna find a discrepancy in my logbook. And I
Oh
thought
wow.
when electronic logbooks were kind of coming into the scene, I was like, oh yeah, that's a good way, because there'll be these questions that you have to fill out on applications, like last 90 days of flying, last 120 days of flying, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, how do you do this? Like in a paper log, you're sitting there with a calculator trying to figure out, okay, from this time to this time, this many hours and all that. And anyway, I wanted to make sure everything added up perfectly and all that. Just, I guess, this kind of OCD of me. But as far as the breakdown, I think I got about 1,300 hours in the 7.3 series. I got about 1,200 hours in the 7.5. I got about 300 hours in the 7.6. I only got about 250 hours in the A320 series between all of them, the 1920s and the 21s. I was only on there for a very brief period of time. And then I got about 2,500 hours in CRJs. So I don't know.
Yeesh.
Add all that up. Yeah,
Put the
it's
work in on the CRJ.
yeah, that was the thing I grinded on in the beginning. I was I was definitely the guy that would fly, I don't know, a lot of hours because I was trying to build up as quick as I could. So I would pick up extra time, to fly and work a lot of hours. Not so much these days, but I still enjoy it. Like sometimes my wife says I get the itch after a while. I'm at home for more than a couple days. I go, let me see what's in open time. Let me see what's happening. What's happening in the world today that maybe I could pick up a trip and go somewhere. In fact, I was just looking today. There was like a long Denver and a long Charlotte, and I thought, "Ooh, I can go and see Shaq maybe if I go out to Charlotte." So it's just like one of those things. I'll get the itch after a while and go, I want to go fly.
Yeah.
So
It's like me taking vacation after day 3. I'm like, that's it. I can't. Yeah. I have to go do something.
yeah, but I mean, at the same time, on the opposite end, sometimes when I get done with like a 4-day trip and it's just been an exhausting trip, and you finish at like 10 at night, and then you got to drive home. The last thing I think about is airplanes on the next day. I go, I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna drive my car, or ride a motorcycle, or do something else, just to kind of switch gears a little bit. But
Yep.
like my wife says, after a couple days, though, I get the itch.
Yep. Yep.
In
Yep.
fact, I'm flying a 182 tomorrow.
Oh, cool.
So
What?
back in the Cessnas tomorrow. Yeah, just
Really? Is that for
yeah.
fun, training,
It's actually an
teaching?
evaluation flight for Civil Air Patrol that I'm going to be doing, just because every annually you have to get checked on it. So
Hmm.
yep,
Right.
tomorrow, little tiny check ride tomorrow in the morning.
How
Mm.
how does that feel to come from flying a big heavy 737, and then a couple of days later or the next day you're in going 80 knots in a Cessna 172?
I will say the first time I think when I was in the CRJ world, I went back to flying Cessna. I was like, oh my god, this is so slow. The sense of speed, like it's just like feels like we're in slow motion for a little bit. Um, but that being said, it's enjoyable. It really is still enjoyable flying to these tiny little airports that you wouldn't fly a 7.3 into. Going out to get the $100 hamburger, doing that
Yeah,
kind of stuff is fun. And with Civil Air Patrol, you get to do search and rescue missions and things like that.
that
So
sounds
I'm looking
amazing.
forward to it. Yeah, just it's kind of like a good way. Like I originally did it to help the cadet program out, to just get guys up in the airplanes, because as a cadet in the Civil Air Patrol, you get opportunities to fly for free, paid by the Air Force. Well, the caveat is somebody has to fly them, and that somebody is me sometimes. So it's nice to take guys up first flight ever, never been in an airplane. It's pretty cool to see, and
So
hopefully they'll remember it.
I have this question I like to ask anybody who's in the aviation industry, specifically pilots. So you're obviously an airline pilot, but what other jobs have you seen or heard of or met people who do like along the way, like that are not airline? Like what other types of airline or aviation type cool aviation jobs out there, for other alternative options than being an airline pilot?
Aviation industry, I think if I could, there's one job that would like wiggle me out of my current position, and that's if I had an opportunity to like fly a spaceship or something, like
That
do
sounds
some sort of
cool.
like if SpaceX were to call me and say, "Hey, we want you to. We're interested in you and being, commander or whatever for the next mission." I'd be like, "Ooh, that'd be tempting, really tempting." I have this like strong desire to do something just more than like what it have a greater impact on the greater society, and I think space is obviously the next one. I'm a big space nerd. I like all the 1960s, the space race and the Apollo program and all that stuff. So if that came along, and like it's funny, I had this discussion with another guy I flew with, and he was the same way. He was like, and he had connections, and he almost like during the pandemic, he almost went to go work for SpaceX. Like he
Wow.
had the opportunity. Only thing is he was going to be the guy that chose the people to fly. Or
Oh.
chose he was gonna basically be the guy in charge of, picking candidates for astronauts,
So you
and,
had to
and he
choose.
kinda was like, I kinda wanna fly too."
Yeah.
Can he pick himself?
Well,
So that was the reason why he said he didn't do it is, but he said if he was allowed to at least go on a couple like, on a mission or something, or go up to do a space flight, he would have done it. But yeah, I thought about that too, and I went, yeah, if they ever have a chance, like if we ever do like a lunar travel experience or something like that, who knows, in the future, and there's opportunities like that, I would do it. Now, that being said, like the kind of the suborbital flights that we're doing right now, I don't know. It's cool. It's cool to see, but I would want to do like some sort of orbit, or go back to the moon, or go further away. That would definitely be the pinnacle if I were to ever do anything. Like I look at a lot of the people in the space program, and just it'd be kind of like putting my mark on that history. It would be kind of cool.
Well,
That's
you don't want
really
to work
cool.
for Richard Branson. You want to work
But
for.
yeah, so if I meet an astronaut, like a real astronaut, like I've flown with a couple, and nonchalantly they're like, what'd you do before working at this airline? They're like, oh, I was at NASA.
I went to the
Like,
moon.
what'd you do at NASA? Like, oh, I was on STS, whatever. And I'm like, wait, what?
Talk to me here.
Wait, rewind that statement just a little bit. Like, were you were crewing on a shuttle mission?
Nice.
And so, like, tell me more. I want to know more. So yeah, that kind of stuff's really cool. Obviously, the space shuttle is no longer around, but if there
And
was
that's
something
why
like,
it sucks that the space shuttle is not around anymore. Just to see them guys land that thing at whatever speed and
oh yeah, it's
that.
just wild. It's so wild. It's so wild how low they put the gear out and everything. How
Mhm.
everything has to work just right,
Wow.
and how long it went. I mean, relatively speaking, fairly safe.
Jeez.
For as long as it ran. Two
Yep.
incidents for the time span that it ran was quite an achievement. But yeah, no, I'm looking forward to that future. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe they'll see commercial space travel, and I'll be in that right position. Maybe the right seniority in the airline to be like, hey, who wants to be the first guy to run these? I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. I'll bid that airplane.
Blue, don't forget, Blue. You had the first question to a space pilot. You're here and now. I'm gonna record this. That's it, man. You had the question, and he answered it for you.
Yes, he
We're gonna
did.
look at.
Yeah, anything space related I think is really cool. I mean, I like commercial air travel. I like the romanticism of TWA and Pan Am of like the 70s and the 80s, and so I try to bring that enthusiasm to the modern day flying, even though most people fly in sweatpants. Um just to kind of, but there are people though. I mean, I know there are people in the back that are videoing the landing, that are coming up and wanting to see the cockpit. It's still, there's still a lot of people that are enthusiastic and excited to fly airplanes.
Man, it
But
it
yeah, the next level would be flying space, I think.
it kills me to see people flying with the windows down.
I
Which
know. I
oh,
Every time I deadhead and I get a middle seat, I look over, and as soon as we push off the gate, the shade goes down. I go,
oh my God, they should have
uh,
locked those in place for takeoff and landings. I swear. Well, let me
uh,
ask you about future of flights and space and stuff. Airbus's endeavor to have a one single pilot. They have the A350 right now. We basically can taxi, take off,
yeah,
land, taxi back
yeah,
to the gate.
yeah.
What do you think about a future with one person in the flight deck? Like,
That's a very interesting thing. I just think back to some of the scenarios, because being a human, right? You're fallible to mistakes of your own. Doesn't matter who you are, or what background you have, or what experience. You're gonna make mistakes, right? And typically, every time that's happened, there's been another guy and go, hey, hey, Captain, are you gonna do this? Or hey, were you thinking this? Or, and kind of like snaps me out of that zonal. And I don't know how that's gonna work with a single pilot. Is the computer gonna be like, hey, look, do this, or hey, watch that thing right there? Or maybe, I don't know. But right now, just that CRM working with another person, and then and I always tell it in the briefing. It's like, it's not a mistake till we both make it. So if you see something, say something.
Hmm.
Don't be
I like
afraid.
that.
Just, yeah.
I
And
like
so
that.
until we both make that mistake, it's not a mistake. So, and yeah, I have thick skin. Like, I'm not gonna say like, oh yeah. And if you feel uncomfortable in some way, like, hey, maybe you should put the gear down now. Like, okay, put the gear down. Like, it's not a big deal. Like, but yeah, I don't know. Single pilot thing, yeah, I see that coming. And the Airbus I think it's gonna come with a lot of caveats, and I think the rollout's probably gonna be a little rough, um, just because of the human factors that you have to overcome in fatigue and attention span and everything else. Because when you don't have that other person next to you, like, who are you talking to? Like, who? Because a lot of times when I do these flights, like, I mean, you guys do these live streams, and you got tons of people that you're chatting with on the live stream, right? Well, you hear ATC talking, but it's not like you're having a conversation with ATC. Typically, you're having a conversation with the guy next to you. At least, hopefully, you are. If not, some guys read magazine or whatever, read books. But I typically like to have a chat or talk, or talk about things, and that's what gets me through the flight. And I go, if I'm single pilot, like, what am I gonna do?
Yeah, good luck on your 4-day trip by
And
yourself.
and what does that what ultimately does that, do to your fatigue level? You know,
True.
how does that, how can you stay alert, when you
Mental.
don't have a other person to chat to just have a conversation with? And it's always, I like learning about the other people, learning about their aviation journey, their stories. What did they do to get here? What are they doing before? And that's when you learn like things like, oh yeah, I flew the space shuttle, or hey, I was a test pilot for Boeing, or and you run across all these interesting people at the legacy airlines that you go, wow, like, like I
Wow.
went to Princeton, I went to Harvard, like wow, okay.
Wow.
But
Wow.
I don't know. Like do I see it inevitably happening? Probably. Um, with what Airbus is doing and what they're trying to do. They're obviously pushing the timeline, right? They're thinking about it. They're implementing some of these things right now. But I don't know if the regulatory and then the human factors can be overcome in the near future. So I don't see it happening. I would say at least for a couple decades, probably maybe 2 decades or more. Which that might be at the tail end of my career anyway. So,
Yeah.
but
Sad. That's what I say.
yeah,
I mean, look, a lot of things are probably going to get automated, going forward, but,
yeah,
I still drive a manual car and you do too, just
yep,
because of the interaction. You know what
yep.
I mean?
The interaction, yep, yep.
Yeah.
And it's
Tesla
nice.
drives itself, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah, no, and I've driven the Teslas and used the autopilot, but that's a very similar concept to flying, right? You're actively monitoring that. You're not turning on the autopilot on the Tesla and just taking a step back. That's when people get into trouble because they think it's like that, but it's very much a lot like aviation, where you're actively monitoring what the car is doing, and it's the same thing. Like I think to have that human that if it's one person to actively monitor, it's a lot of stuff to monitor because I typically like if you're a pilot flying, the pilot monitoring has generally a better scope of the bigger picture because he'll see things actively monitoring the whole thing because he's not focused in on keeping his altitude, keeping his speed, slowing up, and all that stuff. Sometimes you get kind of sucked into that zone, and you need somebody that's looking at the bigger picture to kind of remind you of things.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Would you ever get into long haul flying, like, go to the 777 or something and just do like 10,
Yeah.
12, 15?
So I think my next move, and I think I've had conversations with other people, is probably the 330.
Hmm.
Now that, yeah, I know going back to an Airbus, it sounds weird, but I really like that I like the way that airplane looks. I like the mission that it does. Maybe the 350 one day too, but the 330, the Neo looks so beautiful,
Oh, yes, it
and
does.
it does a mixture. One of the things I enjoyed about the 7576 flying was it was a mixture. Because some of these categories you get into, like 777 or 747s when they were around, it's purely international. And I kind of sometimes just want a variety. I like having a little bit of domestic stuff. Like we would do things on the 75 were like charter flights. Like we would do the NBA flying, right? We would like I don't know if you saw recently, the the baseball,
I
right?
did see
Atlanta
that.
Braves. Yeah,
Yep.
so like we would fly these teams, and you would see these people like that you watch on TV in the back of your airplane, and it's cool. And they're specially configured 75s. They're really cool experience to just kind of be able to do that and say, yeah, I flew, the Clippers to their game, or I flew whatever sports team out there. And I'm not a huge sports guy, but like it's just cool to kind of know that you played that part. And there were just different missions like that. You would do military charters. And yeah, things like that would be I like that variety. I like not just going to Sydney, Australia every week. And sometimes in those international long haul categories, that's what you end up doing. Not all airlines, but typically in the at least where I'm at, it's kind of like you kind of have these certain cities you go to all the time, and I kind of like having a more broader. And I think the 330 kind of fits that mission a little bit more because it's kind of taken over the 76 flying, and I think it does a little bit of domestic stuff too. But I do miss going to Europe. I do miss. I wanted to go to Asia more, but all that stuff kind of happened, and the pandemic happened, and so yeah, I'm looking forward to it eventually.
Jeez. Wow. Just thinking about it, how long have you been in the aviation industry, and how long do you plan on staying?
In the industry?
Yeah, I mean,
So I got serious about it, I think probably 2007 when I got out of the military. So 2007, I graduated 2010 with my degree. I instructed a little bit. 2012, I was hired at the regionals. 2016, I was at a legacy. So it's been fairly quick. Like I look back and I go, holy smokes, like that wasn't that long ago to me sometimes, but it's been fairly quick. Um, so yeah, it has been, I guess it's been a long time, but if you go back to like when I first soloed, it was like 1997. I soloed, I ran out of money and I said, oh, I need money to do this. Not just hopes and desires.
Yep, yep.
right. Right.
Nobody's gonna go like, oh, I got, a couple thousand hours of flying Microsoft Flight Sim. We're like, here you go. Wave that wave
Right.
that certificate over. No, but it's always been a humbling experience, learning everything new, learning the Airbus for the first time. It was just a very humbling because I didn't know anything about Airbus. I really just looked at it and went, wow, that's just so different. I don't know if I'll. But then having to actually learn it, I kind of just I compartmentalized my mind and I thought I'm gonna learn everything the Airbus way. Because like what you don't want to do is you don't want to use a Boeing term to describe an Airbus thing.
Oh boy.
Yeah, heard that one before.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just this different thing. You don't want to call it the mode control panel. It's the FCU, flight control. Just different things like that. Just want to stick to the Airbus terminology. You don't want to say, well, this is kind of like this on my Boeing. No, you don't want to. No, this is totally different. This is managed nav system. This is not LNAV. It's a different way of doing it. Yeah. And so I learned it. It was a humbling experience to learn everything in the Airbus, and it kind of gave me this like I would not be intimidated to go to like a 330 or something now because I know a little bit of how the Airbuses kind of go, and kind of going back to like flying like the Innie Bill's A300. Like I've only flown the 320 series, but I can go back to that and look at it and go, oh, there's some similarities here. Not all, but you can see where some of the stuff developed from, and then kind of worked its way to the 320s and the 330s. So yeah, I think the 330 would be a nice plane to go to. 350 maybe, but we just don't have that many of them at my airline, and it's a very very senior category and very select cities currently. And obviously, pandemic has changed that landscape quite a bit. But if we get a lot of them and they start going to more places, I would maybe look at the 350. But I'm happy on the 73, honestly. It's a good airplane. It's good to
Yeah,
come back to it. It's like a nice little homecoming to come back to it, because I
yeah.
recognized some of the instructors at the training house, and they remembered me, and it was just like a nice little kinda good vibe. And just the mission, you do a little bit of, mostly US, but you do some stuff down south, you go to the Caribbean, you go to Alaska. There's a lot of missions that the 73 does. It's pretty interesting. So, I like it. It's a good plane.
So I have one last question for you, and that is, it's kind of a funny one to kind of break it up, and and I think a good one to kind of begin to close with, and that is, what is your worst flight deck memory?
Good.
Worst flight deck memory.
Yeah, good one.
Ah, oh boy. Worst
Oh,
flight deck. Is this from the airline world, or is this
yeah,
from
airline.
GA or
Yeah,
airline world?
let's do airline world. Yeah,
Okay.
You walked out the
Worst.
flight deck at the end of the day, goes, man.
that sucked.
I had an engine failure. A
This,
lot, not a lot of guys like that fly turbines can say that they had an engine failure, but I did have an engine failure on a CRJ,
Hmm.
and that definitely got my attention quite a bit. And you know, we had just briefed the approach. We're going into Dallas. Everything's all set up in the FMC and everything else, and just kind of casually carrying a conversation before we start our descent. And I just noticed the airplane started yawing, and as I looked at the N1 gauges, I could see one set of engine gauges just kind of spooling down. But
Oh
then I look at
no.
the thrust lever because there's no auto throttle on that thing. The thrust lever is straight up, like with the other one. So it was just this casual realization that, oh no, we got a problem here. Like but then we quickly like started discussing alternate. I mean, we got the airplane stabilized. Obviously, we could maintain altitude, so we had to descend to a certain altitude. We attempted to do a relight. That did not work. I mean, you get bombarded with a lot of information, and that gets your adrenaline running. ATC wants to know what, as soon as you declare the emergency, all the souls on board and all that stuff, and so you're constantly getting interrupted in the middle of doing emergency checklists. So it's just like you want to make sure you're doing everything right, not leaving any stone unturned, and then when you do have like a brief moment to kind of catch your thoughts, you want to say, okay, is there anything else we could have done better? Anything different that we have missed out? Anything? And it's like, it was just this constant, which normally is a normal descent into, but we got in there, we landed, the fire trucks came, checked it out. They said they saw a little bit of oil, but no fire, no, singes. We got escorted to the gate. The people got off. They were super thankful, all that stuff. And then I had to catch a commute flight back home. And basically, my rest of the trip was done for at that point, which was cool in the way that I got to go home earlier, but it wasn't the way I thought I would go home. And then when I got home, I got calls from the airline. Are you okay? Everything. And then I started thinking like, could I have done anything different? You start second guessing yourself. Like, could we have diverted somewhere else? Because we decided to continue to Dallas because we were just about to do our descent. We had everything set up, and we felt like we had multiple options. Like, because the other thing you think about is, what if the other engine goes out? Like, what caused this
Mm.
Oh
engine to
boy.
go out? What
Hmm.
I mean, if you're in a simulator and the instructor fails the engine, like okay, one engine, but they're not going to just turn you into a glider all the time. So but in the real world, you're like, if that engine went out, what might be, maybe the other one might go out. So we started thinking like, where could we go to? Like we started looking at Texarkana, we started looking at Shreveport. I mean, just having like options in the back of your hand to, if we need to glide, we can glide to these places. Like, and I was getting, I mean, we divvy up our tasks, we got all, but it was like the adrenaline was just constant. And then I think I felt it when I got home, and I got home and I just was so tired, like tired than I've ever been.
Wow.
And I just slept. And yeah, I had all these missed calls. I called the union, airline, the company wanted to know what happened. And obviously you have to file a report. So there's just a lot of stuff that you have to do. But yeah, that was definitely not something that I'd want to repeat. I'm just glad everything went good and successful outcome. And we had a couple people second guessing us, like going, well, "Why didn't you guys divert to Shreveport?" And I mean, our reasoning is we were pretty much dead over Shreveport, and yes, distance wise, it would have been shorter. But having to set all that up and get down and everything, it just wouldn't have saved us much time because we were at 30,000 feet, and we had plenty of glide distance to make it to multiple airports along the way to DFW if we needed to. And
Right.
so we decided to continue on. But yeah, there's just all the second guessing you do afterwards, and I think no sim scenario quite prepares you for that. So
Yeah,
yeah, that
my
was-
my heart rate is doubled just listening to that story. Like, wow.
No control E. Start hearing
yeah, there's no control E.
Oh
This
my
isn't
God.
some sort of miracle thing that's gonna come back up. And like I said, the biggest takeaway I took is, what if that other engine goes out? Like we turn into a glider. Like this thing,
So is
we're
there anything
basically
that you learned from that scenario that you kind of practice to this day? Like, do you look at the controls
prioritizing.
differently?
I never realized how much people will pester you like for every information. You have to like sometimes just stop and attend to what's more at hand and not try to answer calls and flight attendants calling saying, "Hey, it's warm back here." They had no idea the engine was out. They had
Yes.
no idea.
Wow.
They were just realizing because obviously when you lose an engine, you lose some of the air conditioning environmental systems, and so it was getting warm in the cabin, and the flight attendant was wondering why it's warm.
Wow.
And so like we just didn't have time. We were busy. We were in checklists. ATC was giving us emergency handling. And I mean, we were gonna make a PA at some point, but we just hadn't gotten to that point yet. And so it's just a lot of people asking you a lot of different things, and you kind of like what I took away from that is you have to just prioritize, right? There's that saying like fly the airplane first, right? Aviate, navigate, communicate, right? So we would get the aviating part down. I mean, it just kind of you hear that and you go, okay. And then when you actually have to do it, and then it really like reinforces that a lot. Like
Mm.
fly the airplane, get everything set up, navigate to where you're trying to go, have some backup plans, right? You lose the other engine, okay, we're gonna put it in Texarkana. And then communicate, make make the PA to the people in the back, let them know what's going on. So yeah, it's a lot to contend with, and so yeah, but it's a learning experience, right? Like anything like that, like you just come out of that going, I don't want to do that again. But if it were to happen, like you kind of have, you know what you're gonna do. You get trained to do it. And like I said, I carry flashcards. I know, like, if we're over the Atlantic, we lose an engine. The 7.6 especially, it'll roll on its back if you let it. If you don't take, you don't get that other, you don't get the rudder in, you don't fly the airplane to send it. If you let that other engine it'll roll you over. So it's like
Wow.
always something I had in the back of my head if we had an engine failure. And then where are we gonna go, right? Like you're at the ocean. Like where are your divert points? Where are you at from it? What's the weather like over there? It's always a good idea to just have it in the back of your head, like, oh, I don't want to go into Shannon, Ireland because it's 30 gusts into 40 knots and rain.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll think of something. And that was my plan alternate or something, and I'm gonna go here instead. So it's a bunch of different things. You're always kind of thinking, and more so now in the left seat, you're thinking about that stuff. More of the bigger picture.
So,
Gotcha.
quick question, because I was in Albuquerque recently, doing some work for out there on the ramp for my company, and they almost had a diversion come in. I think it was JetBlue,
Okay.
and I got to see a different side of it. So, like in your scenario, where it's like, all right, well, we're considering just diverting to like Shreveport or some other airport. Like, how does that work when it comes to communicating with the ground? Because this plane, the reason they were diverting was because there was a medical emergency on the plane. There was nothing
Sure.
wrong with the plane, just medical, and so they were
Typically,
contacting the ground to see,
The
can we
be the
come
best
in?
way yeah, so the best way to do it, if you have time, obviously time permitting, is to have some delegate it to somebody. Your dispatcher is a really good point of contact for that. Again, time permitting. If it's something medical and you have to come in right now, I mean, you can send off a little text message via ACARS to your dispatcher, and they'll take care of everything real quick because I mean, they're there for you. That would be my way of handling it. Obviously, if it's a time crunch, yeah, to figure out the VHF frequency, call ops, and tell them you're coming in, and then take care of it when you get on the ground. But yeah, I mean that's one of the things when you're diverting places, you're trying to get the airplane. But sometimes, if you let the dispatcher know, they might have an alternate suggestion. Sometimes they might have something that you didn't even think about because they're able to look at the big. Because that happened actually. We lost pressurization in a CR in another CRJ story, but we were gonna divert somewhere else. Our brain was set to go here, and then they said go to Amarillo, and I was like, oh, I didn't think about that, and we went to Amarillo.
Hmm.
Wow.
And they took care of all that. They called operations. They had it all set up. They knew that we were gonna come in. They had the stairs. They had the GP all ready to go.
Hmm.
So yeah, the more you can do that beforehand, the better it's gonna turn out. As
Jeez.
far as when you get on the ground and have a place to park, have some place that can service your airplane, that kind of stuff. But
I am here scrolling through your social media. Um, your Instagram account. I didn't realize you have two Instagram accounts.
I
Um,
do.
is okay. So can I give it out? And is that
Yeah.
the is
Yeah,
that the
so the aviation one obviously is Captain Chemtrails.
right?
I
So guys, Instagram Captain Chemtrails.
I kinda segmented it because I had a lot of car stuff too, like, originally, and I kinda thought, there's, like it seems like the car guys don't care to hear about aviation, and it seems like the aviation guys didn't care to hear about cars. I'm like,
Yeah,
let me just make another account just
it's
for car
true.
stuff."
So I'll drop the link in the chat.
Very few of us like all that stuff.
Drop
Yeah,
the-
it's very few of us who like both cars and planes.
Yep.
Yeah, so
If you're on Instagram, guys, Captain Chemtrails, I dropped the link in chat. You gotta go join it. Tons of pictures on here. Ridiculous amount of pictures and just behind the scenes stuff, and your Civil Air Patrol stuff and all that is on there. Good
Yep.
pick.
Yep,
And
yeah,
then
I
guys
try to
in
just do little
cars,
highlights of the journey. It's been a big
exactly.
journey.
And if you're in cars, there's chemtrail whips. I love
Yep.
that.
I love
Jason,
that.
yeah,
I kinda ran with the chemtrails.
yeah,
Originally, it was just a play on the whole conspiracy theory, and it kinda went with Captain really well,
Yep.
And a lot of people said that's good. I just came up with it just randomly, and I thought it'd just be funny that a real world pilot has chemtrails as a name. And yeah, now I kind of rolled into chemtrail whips, and who knows? I think I have a third one actually, chemtrail simulations, that I'm trying to kind of maybe start doing sim stuff on. So
Which
when I
leads
use
me
a
to it. Let me drop your YouTube channel
Yes, yes,
right here
yes.
as well in chat because if he gets the time and can do it, I would love for him to stream.
yeah,
Just to teach us some stuff about the Boeing stuff. Whether it's the 7.5 or the 7.3, we'd love it, man.
yeah, I could, yeah.
And by the way, officially, you've been the longest guest we've had. Two
Oh
hours.
my goodness, I was thinking like I'm not gonna have much to talk
Is
about,
that
but
is that the longest one? Is that the
2 hours.
I think.
Two
2
hours.
Okay.
hours. Wow.
Cool. Cool.
That's it.
Cool.
Well,
I've
I hope
enjoyed every
everybody
second of it.
enjoyed it.
Oh
Well,
man, it's
thank you guys. No, you guys are great. I've watched both you guys over the years, and it was nice to finally meet you guys at Expo, which is a good thing if you guys ever go to Expo. More about than seeing the latest gadgets is just meeting some of these people like
Yep.
XP and Blue Games in person, in the flesh. Hanging out with them in San Diego, and later going to Rookie's house was just it was a cool experience. I enjoyed meeting you
Oh,
guys.
and I don't cut you. Captain Geo is killing me in chat. He wants me to ask you if you would trust a flight simmer to land a 737.
Oh boy, that's the famous question, right? Like, the
That's the
pilot is
question.
incapacitated. Do we have a pilot in the back? And then, every flight simmer is gonna jump up, and I could see Geo.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, I can do it. I
He's in
know.
the back.
Oh man,
I'm in the back.
hey,
I can give you the answer, and then you can
what's
give me
that?
yours.
What can give me?
After coming from sitting behind a computer and going
Uh-huh.
into just the mock-up 7.3 that Rookie have, which is 1-for-1 scale, and the sound and the noise and everything, it changed your perspective immediately. For me, it did.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
immediately overwhelms you. Like,
yeah.
what the heck? Would I try my best and use automation and autoline and stuff? Yeah, but I don't know, man. It's the feel is
It's hard. Yeah, even and I've
hard.
seen those YouTube videos like kinda, simmer land like a level D simulator or something like that. I will say that there is a little bit of a difference even going from the multi-million dollar level Ds to the real plane, like landing the real plane versus it flies differently. And you have it down, you know where switches are at and everything else by the time you leave the simulator. But it's a humbling experience when you first land the airplane in real life.
Mm.
Yes.
Uh, so it's hard, man. I mean, if we're down to nobody, no other pilots, no deadheaders, no jump seaters, and it's Geo in the back, I'm gonna say Geo come up. And I'm like, I'll just do that just specifically for Geo. How about that?
So
Um,
Geo is a special case. He could land a 737.
but man, that would be a really bad day if we got down to flight simmers. Hey, any flight hey, any pilots? Nope. Okay. Any jump seaters? Nope. Okay.
Flight
Any
simmers.
flight simulators?
Or step forward, the whole half the plane steps up.
Oh man, there's just a lot. There's a lot of little deep in the minutia things that you just don't think about that you have to do with all the time. I mean, I think V1 mentioned like stabilized approach criteria, all these gates and stuff, which is actually one of the reasons why I enjoy flying flight sims. Sometimes you're just not underneath the gun of having to adhere with all these things that you're worried about. Like, oh, it's
Right.
not as stringent because the consequences are just the flight sim. So, but yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think a lot of people always ask that. Yeah, I've actually had people come up to the cockpit and say, "Hey, I've flown a Cessna or whatever back in the day, and if you need any help or whatever," and I'm like, "Oh, appreciate it." And
Back in the day.
yeah, it's like, okay,
Wait.
I appreciate you letting me know that. Thank you, sir.
Wait, you telling me that a Cessna pilot comes to
Yeah,
you in the
yeah.
flight deck during
Yeah,
your
a
flight?
lot of times they'll come with their kid. They'll be like, "Hey, my kid wants to check out the cockpit." Great, come up, say hello. And then they get off of this whole story that they want to be a pilot back in their time when they were younger or whatever the case is. And then they have a couple hundred hours in flying, GA airplanes or whatever. And so, like, hey, if you need anything, let me know. Like, if you have any issue. And I was like, whoa, okay.
Like, how are you actually gonna help me?
I mean, I try to be nice. I try to give everybody the benefit
But
of the
let's
doubt,
be
I guess.
honest. How is a
Like,
Cessna pilot actually gonna help you? Like, what is he gonna? What is?
you know, if that
Maybe he can give you
makes
the
him
weather. He can probably give you the weather.
Run the radios.
if that makes him go like, hey, you know, a real captain said you know, like good enough to come up or whatever, and that makes his day or whatever, that's fine with me. I mean, like I said, it's like one of those scenarios you don't ever want to get into, but
I'm
um,
confident I can run the radios. Seriously,
there
like
you go. There you
Same,
go.
same.
Let's fly some GA. Like I will, by any chance anybody wants to go flying GA, I'll take them up, no problem. Let's see how you really, you know. But in fact, a tail wheel is another humbling experience. Fly a tail wheel in real life. That'll really humble you.
yeah, the nose. No
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Wow, man. Good stuff, man. This is absolutely fabulous, man. Thank you so much, Chemtrails,
Thanks,
coming
guys.
on.
Yeah, thanks for guys for
Love this talk. This was
thanks
good.
for the invite. It's been a good chat. Really has been fun sharing all the stories.
Mm,
Hopefully some guys are inspired. So if you guys are in the process, you know, if you guys are thinking about being a pilot, if you guys are in university, no matter where you are in the process, if there's anything I can point you in the right direction, just feel free to ask. And I'm probably gonna get a flood of DMs after this, but it's fine. I'll look at them and I talk to everybody. I'll at least address their question.
Well,
Some way,
hopefully
someone.
you'll get a flood of subscribers as you're posting those new videos on your YouTube
There you
channel
go.
next week. I'm gonna give you a
If I do,
timeline.
if I do
Next
YouTube and
week.
stuff like that, it's not for any kind of fame, but it's for the guys that you know you guys want to know a little bit more. You guys want to kind of up your realism. I'll do it for that. Yeah,
yeah.
that's fine.
That-
It's I don't think I'm as entertaining as some YouTubers out there. So
You'll be surprised, man.
yeah.
You'll be surprised.
Entertainment is the learning part of it. Your delivery style and how you teach is what we want. You understand? Because now I find students of V1 correcting me in my simming, like, nah, V1. So now if I fly to Z, we'll be like, yeah, Captain Chemtrails says don't do it that way. It's like, yeah.
Like, well, Captain Chemtrails ain't here, so
you know what I always say in everybody's streams, you know, I'm like center line touchdowns. Everybody's going for that butter and floating it halfway down the runway, and I'm like, you guys gotta put that much importance to getting the center line and the touchdown zone. It is really vital that you hone that in. And I know it's hard to do in a desktop sim or whatever. I mean, VR helps, but do your best to try to perfect it. Try to figure out where the center line is to where the, you know, on the dash you can place like kind of a sight picture. And you know, the good thing is you have replay and stuff. Like obviously in the real world you don't have replay. So one of the things you can do is like, you know, you can go back and go, was that center line, was that in the touchdown zone, you know, was that and it doesn't have to be on the 1,000-footers. A lot of guys just die for the 1,000-footers. It's the touchdown zone. That's first 3,000 feet or first third of the runway. So and it's that little area that's lit up on those long runways. So try to get it in there, try to get it on the center line, and then the butter's just kind of like that cherry on top. If you can smoothly do that, that's just like really ultimate, like, you know. But more important is getting it in the touchdown zone on the center line, because that allows you the best margin for in case something goes wrong, right? Say you have a thrust reverser go out. Like if you're off right a center line and the thrust reverser doesn't deploy, or and then you have asymmetric thrust and stuff like that, you just gave yourself no out, and you're going to be along for the ride into the grass. So like things like that, you know, just kind of think about it back in mind when you're doing your landing and stuff. And I know it's hard. It's hard in a sim, desktop sim. But if you guys can nail that and consistently do that and then fly like real world, you guys will be it'll be good.
I'm taking that advice. Smash it in the touchdown zone, guys. Center line.
Don't smash it. Don't smash it. I didn't say smash it. I said try to put as much effort as a lot of I noticed this from a lot of guys that sim and stream and stuff, is they just
Talking
go
about
for the
us.
butter. Like the one, like it's a third of the component, right? And you got the butter, but that was only a third of it. Like if you were off center line, if you were floated it halfway down the runway, I mean that's 2/3 of that is not there, you know. So try to get all three components of that to be perfect. And that's why if you look at like one of the things I enjoy doing on Flight Sim 2020 is those landing challenges, because they measure you based on that, right?
Right.
Your where you touch down at, how far left and right you are, and then the actual rate. So it's three components. and that translates to the real world too.
Taking
Yeah,
notes
man.
right now. That's gonna be the 3 keys to my
Pressure's on.
Yeah.
Pressure's on. You
That's the
guys,
3
Yeah.
keys to my life. I can no longer screw up my landing because I've been taught that the
Yeah.
3 keys.
and do some crosslands. Try to practice crossland landings. Set yourselves up with 20 knot crossland and kicking that rudder. I mean, obviously that's going to depend on what kind of rudder system you're using, but and if you can get good at that and fly real planes too, you'll notice that comes in handy.
Wow, 50 feet over the threshold. That's what I aim for. Man.
Yeah, on speed. Yeah.
I was gonna say, is
Try
that
to
correct?
adhere
Is that a myth? 50
No,
feet
yeah,
over?
ref speed 50 feet over. Yeah, you kind of want to. That'll put you. These are basically they're all gates, right? Like the stabilized approach criteria, 1,000 feet. It's all to mitigate the chances of a mishap, right? Because if the statistics prove if you go through all those gates, you're stabilized at 1,000 feet, you're on speed, you cross 50 feet of the threshold, that you're gonna have a successful landing. Like there's like the margins become very slim that's gonna turn into something else, because it just over the years the statistics of data have proved that if it's stabilized, if you're crossing the threshold at the proper height, on speed, all that stuff, you're gonna have a good outcome. May not always be butter, but you're gonna not be going off the end of the runway. You're not gonna be going into the grass, that kind of stuff.
It's safe, basically.
It's safe, yeah.
Yeah.
It's safer. It's much safer, exactly. Safety's number one, right? That's the key.
Definitely. That's it. That's the kind of instructional we
Guys,
need, man. That's
what we
it.
need.
That's what we need. Definitely.
Yeah. No, good luck, guys. I'll be watching.
No, we'll be watching you. We'll be watching you on this. That's good stuff, man. Wow. Good to go, man. Absolutely. Another one for the books. This is great. This is
good.
absolutely great. People are saying we should throw this up on Spotify as a podcast. This is a perfect podcast right here. It's good
Yeah.
listening. You
Yeah.
know, I think I spent more time listening this time than talking because you had such good things to say, just stories and advice and stuff. And we appreciate that. Absolutely.
I appreciate it, and good luck to all the future aviators out there. Good luck to you guys and your streaming and stuff. I think the community is it's exploding. I think flight sim's going to have a resurgence, because it used to be kind of a big thing back in the day when computers first were coming out, desktop, and they kind of just subsided. When we lost FSX, or Microsoft dropped my flight simulator, and now it's kind of coming back. Competition's coming back. We have two major good simulators coming out. I mean, it's good to see people into flight sim, which hopefully that segues into real life, which hopefully doesn't lead to a pilot shortage. Guys are interested in doing this and following through into the real world.
True.
Yep.
All right, Blue, what you got coming up for the weekend, man?
Man, first of all, before we go there, I just want to say this is a conversation that I've always wanted to have with a pilot. That's my ending thoughts on this whole thing. It's just,
Thank you.
I've always...
I was kind of thinking in the back of my mind, because V1 was here one time, and I was like, man, how am I going to follow up that ad? If he's still here, I mean that's
that was a great podcast too.
Well, yeah, man.
Yeah.
That was the
I
opening
kind of thought
sound.
about it when, man, V1 was on their podcast. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to follow that up, but I'll try.
Man, he had stories and bourbon, so it was good now, but
Yeah.
nah, just as excellent up there, man, with just learning and listening and and just like wow,
Yeah,
I wish
thank
you'd done
you.
something
Thank
different.
you, guys.
Absolutely.
He
Yeah,
was
I'll
more
be good.
against
I'll be-
CRJs.
Yeah, you guys like the CRJ, yeah?
And blimps. And
Yeah.
blimps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way,
It's
guys,
true.
we are still looking for a blimp pilot to interview. So if anybody knows one, please send them to our DMs.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, XP, as for the weekend, man, well, I don't usually stream on the weekend. We'll be missing out on Cross the Pond, but I'll definitely be watching you guys. My wedding anniversary, dating anniversary is actually this weekend. So we'll be handling that. I also do work, I believe, Saturday morning on the ramp again, so that'll be fun. I'm doing pushback training and got the halfway push a plane for the first time yesterday.
Wow.
Pretty
nice, man.
cool.
I'm going to be looking out for you, Blue, when I go to
Exactly.
Intercontinental.
Yeah,
I'm
man.
gonna
Our
be-
gate. Yeah, you're right there. You're right there.
I'm
So
gonna be looking for you.
if you get a bid,
I'm gonna expect perfect Marshall
If you get a bid in Houston,
I'm
let
gonna
me
come
know.
out the jet bridge and make sure that that nozzle was spot on.
If you get a bid in Houston, definitely let me know before you take off, so I can get a video or a picture of you landing, and then I'll meet you on the ramp.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
And then tomorrow I'll be streaming DCS World in the F-16, rocking a brand new Blue Aero Force livery. Looking forward to that. So it's gonna be a lot of fun. So that's what I got going on. What about you, XP?
Tomorrow I'm debating if I should do anything or not, because the next day it's going to be 9 hours straight. Jeez. I know.
Get some rest.
And it's first thing early in the morning. It's going to be like start 8 a.m. Got to be off the ground at 8:47, I think. So, and then it's a 7-hour flight plus wrap up. Wow. So
That's a long time.
let's see what I do tomorrow. I don't know yet.
Is there a
but-
limit to how many people can do that? Because I mean,
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
So
good.
you got to
Good.
bid. You got to bid slots. You got
I was
about
gonna say, that would be mass pandemonium if it was just open
yeah.
for all.
It used to
Yeah, the
be.
one-
It used to be.
Mhm.
Yeah. Is it on a separate server or something that you
No.
guys?
That's it.
No. Okay.
Yeah.
But like, what if somebody just spawns it wherever JFK and then just like 100 people just spawn there?
You get
And
banned.
you're like,
Well,
You
they
don't
told-
get banned.
you
You
can
just
pick it
won't
up,
get
right.
service.
They told you, yeah. If you're not already pre-planned and agreed upon, you'll try to get clearance and just won't give it to you. That's
Yeah.
just- yeah. So, they encourage you to fly in the spaces that, like, first you can fly into JFK from somewhere in the U.S., but you can't fly out doing a cross the pond event.
what are you flying, XP?
I'm doing the A340.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
yeah.
Second trip in the thing.
I bought that myself. I just did a couple flights in it. Very similar to the 320, which is kind of cool.
Mhm.
But a couple little differences. But it was more of a curiosity, just to see how, just like the A300s. But I enjoyed it. It's been nice so
Oh
far.
yeah, saw V1 dump fuel from the thing on his stream. So I was
What?
like, all right.
I missed
Oh, yeah.
that.
Oh yeah, he was dumping fuel from that thing. I was
That's
like, wow,
cool.
Intentionally, I guess.
intentionally. And then I
That's
lost
always
an
that's the great thing about simming is like, oh, who cares about the price of fuel?
right, exactly. So
Uh,
yeah,
That's
But,
cool. Good luck. Good luck.
yeah. That way I don't have to have the yoke in front of me the entire time, so I can actually put food in my lap and eat. Because I'm gonna have to take a break some point.
No
that-
trade table on.
No tray table now. Somebody sent me a link to one on was it on Amazon. Like, you can order a tray table for your table. I'm like, really? It's like, yeah, it folds out just like in the Airbus. I'm like, no way.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that's what's gonna come up. We'll see what to do tomorrow. I don't know, but yeah, this is good. I'm gonna go back and listen to this podcast. That's what I'm gonna do, though.
Same.
Absolutely, guys. The links are in chat for Captain Chemtrails. It's Instagram. Check him out. The YouTube link is here. I'll post it one more time for you guys. Just go ahead, hit that sub button, hit him up, and then we look forward to having more from you, man. Absolutely do. We appreciate it, definitely. Being on the show and then teaching the community, the community here. You started in it, you went real world, and now you're gonna come back and even give back to us more. So we appreciate that. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's the reason why I do it. I like to just inspire everybody. I like to keep everybody focused because I know we all get into these ruts or maybe like questions whether or not this is for me, and even myself included. I've had that conversation several times, but you got to keep the motivation. And one of the ways to do it is maybe seeing other guys doing it, maybe seeing different ways that you can do it, and yeah, just to keep that focus, to keep it going. Right? What is it you say, Blue? Like, give it all you got. Yeah,
Yes,
and
sir.
That's true. 100%.
Yes, it is.
100%.
Good
Give it
deal.
all you got, but you need to be sometimes reminded of it. And that was the whole intent of doing Instagram and stuff, is just to keep people focused and motivated. And I always get people say, "Oh, I love your stories" or whatever. I like following you through, but it was just to kind of give you a little glimpse, so that way for those of you guys who are coming up the pipeline, hope to see you guys on the real world side.
I will
It'll
see
be
you on
fun.
the world
We'll talk
side.
about Flight Simulator. I have yet to have a conversation with somebody about Flight Sim. It just doesn't come up.
Wow,
No.
7,000 hours and not one other crew member
Yeah.
can talk about.
No,
flight
if it was
sim.
like something like me and V1 or something in the cockpit, I could see it happening. But yeah,
Right.
That would be an amazing flight. So you and V1 together.
Oh man. Wow. Interesting. Nah. None of your first officers want to talk to you about flight simming. They're
No,
afraid.
I don't know how to even bring that up. But if they said something,
They're probably embarrassed to bring it up themselves.
yeah,
Exactly.
we'll have to see. It'll be like an interesting way to segue into it, but it'll, we'll see.
Make for a good trip or an awkward trip. One of the two.
That's true. That's
I
true.
know. Wow.
Like this guy
But I
thinks
like
it's
the
a
flight
game.
community. You guys are all great. You guys have been
Yeah, man.
very humble. Everybody's willing to learn. Some guys just take it to that next level.
V1 said would probably overfly the destination talking about flight simming, aka real world. Oh my word! I'm done.
Yeah,
That's it. I'm done.
Airbus, yeah, that was one thing I never understood, and maybe V1 has some sort of explanation on why this happens. But why doesn't the Airbus descend when you have a lower altitude? Like you always have to initiate it. I just thought for as much automation as this thing has, like that is one thing that they didn't think about. Like that was one thing I always had a question mark about that. Maybe V1 will know the answer.
I
to
thought that was
but
only in a
just-
sim. I didn't realize it worked like that in real life.
Yeah, no, like you have you have your little down arrow and the path and everything, and the ATC says that across this fix at this altitude, so you have the lower altitude in. But if you don't start down, it doesn't go down.
Hmm.
If you don't engage some sort of descent mode, it's not going to go down for you. And so I don't know. I never understood why, and then I left the airplane. But I just always like every time I saw that little white down arrow, I'm like, okay, I'm looking at that thing. I'm not making sure I'm not going to fly over it. I think you do get a message afterwards, but that's it. Like you don't get any chimes, no nothing.
Yep. On your merry way.
On your
Wow.
merry way.
I hear you. Oh man.
All right,
Lovely,
guys.
Lovely.
Hope you
We
guys
gotta
have
wrap
a
this
good,
up.
safe weekend. Happy
so
Halloween
funny.
too, and all that. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Definitely. Blue, give us the ending, man. Give us the ending.
You
got
guys
the right-
know
the words-
what
the
it
words of
is.
wisdom.
Remember, you have 3 choices: give up, give in, and give it all you got. Peace, love, and God bless you. We will see you guys next time, next Blu-XPerience. Thank you, Captain CHEMTRAILS. We'll see you guys next week.
Later. Bye.
later.
See ya. See ya. See ya. Wouldn't want to be ya. Sorry, I'm just stalling because I'm trying to hit all the buttons
Where's
in the
him?
background. There we go.
No.
Oh, my
my
God.
words. No. It's all good.